two councillors not here, but we are quorate. So welcome everybody, Wittersham Parish Council. We'll start with the apologies and reasons for absence.
Borough Councillor Jenny Shilton, so not the meeting at
Right.
Councillor Bennett may be late because he's working.
And Councillor Boyd-Smith is slightly late, but he's just doing it.
That's a tradition.
Okay, are there any declarations by members of any interest, pecuniary or other than? I don't think there's anything obvious.
No.
No, not unless any of the other two have any. So we don't need to approve any applications for dispensation. A reminder to everybody that if it works, the recording, the meeting is being recorded and we do put it on the internet on our YouTube channel. So bear that in mind, please. At this point, we'll adjourn for the public session where the public have an opportunity to answer questions or make points. Welcome, Alan. You've only just missed the beginning.
Sorry, I'm late.
Now, what we need to do is to just find out who everybody is and who, because we've got a lot of people here, I don't know them all, and who wants to talk about items on the agenda, so we can try and structure it. Also, we've got a very busy agenda, so we will be trying to move things along and not spend more time than is necessary on that section. So if we go along the front first, for the benefit of the clerk, the lady here in the white top.
Hello, I'm Tara DeLinda from Atelier DeLinda Architects.
Okay,
and we're responsible for the design of the first
Poplar Farmhouse.
Poplar Farmhouse. Yeah.
And the next lady?
Hello, I'm Lucy Skinner. I live at number 2 Swan Cottages, opposite the property that you want to
Number 2 Swan Cottages, okay.
Yeah, I'm David Skinner. I live
Same here.
same.
We know Rick. Hello. And now along the back row, I can't see the lady behind the Tyler.
Catch up. I'm
David. I beg your
I'm
pardon.
here to
David
speak
Williams.
about the Judith Mary Learning Fund.
Yeah.
Now called a fund, not a charity.
And it's called a fund, not a charity.
A better word, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm Miss Buxton here on behalf of Audrey Buxton.
Right, thank you. On the Poplar Farm one.
Yes.
Nicola Buxton here for the same
Same, right.
Thank you.
Jill Radford, interested in the Lloyd's Green application next
Okay.
to number 16 and also the Poplar Farm.
Okay.
Christine Woods. I'm here regarding the land adjacent to the Poplar Farmhouse development.
I'm Valerie Townsend, and I'm here for the same reason, called a cottage.
You're called Cottage, are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Townsend, called the cottage.
Called Cottage, okay. Right, that's very helpful, thank you. So, let us first start off. We always do the planning ones first, and I think everything here was planning. So they're on the order of the... I beg your pardon. I'm just being reminded that Mr. Williams is here for the fund, but of course he is also very much in Poplar Farmhouse. Okay, we do the planning first generally. So we'll talk about the land adjacent to Poplar Farmhouse. I think probably it makes sense, Tara, for you to tell us what you want to about that. And if I could ask you to stick to about 3 minutes, that would be helpful.
Thank you. I'll probably be less than 3 minutes because I suspect you're all neighbours of the Poplar Farm development and you've probably all seen the application and read all the information on there. So all I really want to draw your attention to is that all our projects start with the nature. We make a real attempt to keep all the trees and all the nature that's there already and build our designs around those. And the reason we do that is when we do the developments, because we've kept the nature there, they feel more in keeping with what's there already, and it gives it a certain timelessness feel about it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we are very conscious of overlooking and people who are there already, and we don't want to impinge on the privacy, and we don't want to impinge on overlooking. So the orientation of the buildings are designed to minimise that aspect. And thirdly, there is a housing crisis in this country. It's a beautiful village, I think, and I think this is an opportunity to bring young people into the village and to keep the continuity of that village life. I don't really want to say much more at this stage. I'd rather answer any questions that you have, any concerns that you have. We've tried to keep the design as in keeping with local vernacular architecture as possible. We're not doing anything dramatic or modernist. We're trying to keep it as low-key as possible.
All right.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure councillors will have questions for you.
Sure.
But before that, let's hear from the other people
Yes.
who will go along the rows in the same way. The people who want to talk about Poplar
Can I start?
Farmhouse. I'm sorry?
Can I start?
Well, we'll try and go along in the same order, but maybe we'll have to dot around a little bit. Okay?
Yeah.
But I do take the point that you've got one of the listed buildings there. So,
This goes ahead. Where do we park outside? We park on the main road. Where are we supposed to park?
because you're in Swan Cottages
Yeah.
and you therefore park as you all do along there in straight line.
Absolutely, yeah.
Totally understand. And it's a point well made, and we'll have to think about that when we get to it. But the point is absolutely taken.
Sorry, can I understand that a bit better? Am I allowed to interject?
Well, if we're not careful, we will go on forever.
I see.
Let's try and pick up the points that people
For
want,
sure.
and then try and structure your responses and councillors' questions. Because
Sure.
this is quite an important application for
Sure.
us.
Sure.
I've spent 38 years driving lorries, and I'm currently spent the last 22 years working for a construction firm. So I know what's going to have to happen opposite my house, and it isn't pretty. And despite what the lady says about being in keeping and trees and this, that and the other, when you get Arctics and concrete mixers and scaffold lorries and vans and workmen and everything all congregating in that entrance, how am I supposed to carry on with my life? My wife works nights as well, you know, how are we supposed to deal with all the inconvenience and the disturbance? And for me, it's a safety matter. That stretch of road, as you all know, is really dangerous because people approach the end of the parked cars, they can't see the other end, so they creep down. And people coming the other way sometimes get quite belligerent and they go, it's my right of way. They then mount the pavement and just drive along the pavement. I mean, anyone could be coming out of those drives and you could be walking your dog. People don't care. And then you're going to throw construction traffic into that mix as well. And what about the school kids going to and from school down the pavements? That same stretch of pavement. I think it's mad.
Okay, I take your point, I understand it. Just as a little aside, before we move on, my understanding in planning terms, however illogical, is that disturbance during construction is not a planning issue.
No.
Now, it's
Yeah.
bonkers, but that's, I believe, the rule.
One other point, if I may, is if they get the 4 houses, I understand the original plan was for 29. Once they've got access, what's to stop them doing the other 29?
There was 23,
23,
but it was
sorry,
further up. I think, as far as, it's a fair question to raise at this moment, the 23 were to be accessed through where they're building the 4.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they can't do the 23 unless they find another access to that, and that has always been the biggest problem. Paul, welcome. We're talking about Poplar Farmhouse.
So, you know, you might have one period of disruption that you could probably get over, but then there's going to be another one.
There's no,
after.
until they find an access, the other ones can't be built.
No.
I mean, if you like, this will block off that rejected application because they were going to go up that way. Right. So Mr. Williams isn't going to comment, I think, on Poplar Farmhouse, are you?
Got a comment?
Yes.
I have no comment particularly. I mean, I have know what's going on.
Okay.
Consider yourselves.
Okay. All right, thank you. The lady then,
Miss Buxton.
yes indeed,
Yeah, we submitted quite a long letter.
and I have read it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And one of the reasons is this is a heritage asset that's going to be spoiled, especially if the road is going to be altered to accommodate increase in traffic. And that's going to happen to several listed properties that surround this parcel of land.
Sure.
And I think that's all I want to say. And that's on behalf of Mrs Buxton, but there are a lot of other points as well.
That's as in Audrey Buxton.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate you say I shouldn't comment till the end, and I'm happy to wait to the end, but there are some things that I could say now that might help.
Let's go through and try and gather them, because what you may find is that 2 people or 3 people
Sure.
are making similar points.
Sure.
The next lady?
I don't have anything to say at this
No.
point.
As you know, the
Just on Poplar Farmhouse at
Yeah,
this point, Jill.
they had the appeal decision for Poplar Farm, but a lot of the points that related to his inspection, the inspector's decisions, will apply to this. For instance, like the heritage asset, as I said, and he said the farmhouse has somewhat been compromised with the use of tarmac surfacing. Nonetheless, the listed building is still a good example of an altered wheeled house. So he paid particular importance to the setting of that property, and also there's the connectivity with regard to A&B and the historic field patterns and its linkage to Corner Cottage and the White House and the White Cottage. And so if you start destroying all, where are they going to connect the sewers, for instance? If they want to connect via Lloyd's Green Field, they're going to go through that hedgerow, which is the boundary. But if you look at the map, I won't do it now, but if you look at the historic map, the shape is still there. The connectivity between your homes and that property is the last remaining link of that historic field pattern and the link to the AONB and the Woodland Beyond. So that's just some of the things. But he paid, this got sort of put aside, this one by the inspector, because of a lot to do with the heritage asset. And I think this many houses is too many. I think the one that they had with the 5 bedrooms, fair enough. I think that wasn't going to impede on that area pocket of land and the setting beyond. But I think 4, and to say that they're for young people in this area, 3-bedroom home, never in your dreams will the young people around here be able to afford those homes. Much as you might like them to, and as much as we would love them to, it won't happen. They can't afford those. There's no affordable housing there. So I'm really sorry, but I can't see that these 4 homes are. I'd rather stick with the 5-bedroom that they got permission for already, and would not increase the degree of traffic to an extent that I think would be a danger as to much as if you have 4 homes that could quite easily have 3 cars each. And like I say, the access, we already know the dangers that are involved, and what if they meet halfway, and all that went before the other applications. So I think 4's too many.
Right, thanks, Jill.
The lady has mentioned a few points that I was going to bring out. For example, the fact that the size of the properties being proposed are not in keeping with young people getting on the property ladder, especially in this village. They need cheaper houses, and yes, there is a demand for housing, but it's not necessarily for large detached properties. Also, I'm worried about the risk to the flooding. From the point of view, we have a lot of stress on our local pipes, water pipes and sewerage, as we've known in the last few months that we've had various bursts of both, which haven't been pleasant. And if they've got 4 properties being built with at least a minimum of 3 people in each property, some might be working from home, some might be going out to work, but they are going to be spending time at home, using a lot of water, and that water has to go somewhere. And so does everything else that is used in the house. And I'm really worried that my property gets flooded in the winter months. There's climate change that, not my property, my garden gets, I'm actually at the back of your development. And I just don't know where all this excess...
Just tell me again, which one are you?
White Cottage.
Your White Cottage,
yes.
Which is the left hand of the
I'm
pair
right,
with,
yes.
with Corner Cottage.
Yes, and I am a bit confused with the plan regarding the pond, because my boundary goes through a pond, which is at the bottom of the land, and I can't understand where this beautiful surrounding conservation area around the pond is going to go when I go right through it, but I don't know, perhaps there's another pond that's going to be built. But I am worried about surface water, excess water in amenities. And again, as this lady said, the fact that the properties are not necessarily for village folk. That's all I'd like to say.
I think a fair point that you just raised there, going back some years before you came, was that your curtilage, as it were, not your house, but very close to it, was actually under considerable flood risk one winter because of the stream next to you was a problem.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that it's a fair point that
I
you
mean, it's
raised
lower.
that.
I mean, gravity will just, you know, there's only physics and water will go to the lowest point.
Sure, indeed.
And next door as well.
And now, Corner Cottage.
Virtually everyone's sort of said everything that I want to say, but the surface water is the thing that worries me, because not only that, we're listed buildings.
Yes.
That water gets into our property. Where do we go from there? Listed
Yeah.
buildings are supposed to be protected.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just add a little bit?
I'll let you
Please
speak
do.
now, because you're going to say the same.
I live at Corner Cottage. The elevation of the site is higher than our land. Yeah? So if we stood in our kitchen, there's quite a thing. We've lived in the village since the 70s, we haven't been flooded, luckily. And I don't want to be flooded. So what are they going to do with stormwater?
Because of the runoff. Okay.
I might just add that quite a few weeks ago, I walked up the village and we've had rain, and there was water at the bottom of everybody's drive and all on the pavement where your mum lives. There's a lot of water.
Yeah.
It was all about
Can't get out the drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's flooding worse and worse. And her back garden has flooded as well. And I know the paddock and the field beyond the bottom, that floods as well.
Can I just say one quick thing, sorry.
Go on.
Regarding the gentleman in front of me with the heavy goods vehicles, I totally agree with him. But we're going to end up, if it goes ahead, like outside Tesco, big potholes in the road.
The damage that the construction vehicles will do to that road, turning into that drive,
and the pavement,
and the pavement is
okay.
It will need
All right,
doing.
I think that everyone there has made some very good points. I've made some notes, and thank you for that. Now, Tara wants to come back on which ones that she picks out.
So, first of all, thank you very much. And I'm not insensitive to the fact that you are very close neighbours and that this is very important development. So I'm grateful for your feedback. I just want to give you a few things that I've drawn on. One is that we literally mimicked the driveway that has already been approved. So that driveway cuts into Mr. David Williams' land to make it wider, to make that access safer from off the road, because we appreciate that even at the moment that's a very dangerous drive. So that's broadened to the detriment of Mr. Williams, who's approved it. So that entrance would be improved, and it's already, I'm afraid, been approved by planning, not by us, but a previous development which you alluded to with the signs. So that is already established, if you like, in planning. Now, I'm not saying that to make you uncomfortable at all. To the point of drainage, which I think is a key one.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you? Are you talking about display? Are you talking about removing the brick wall?
Yes.
So part of a Grade 2 listed curtilage is going to be used as an access. So what you're saying?
What we've done, we've taken the previous architect's drawings and been approved by planning, because we didn't want this to be an issue.
They were approved for 23 houses by planning, is that right? Or
yes, but if that has been approved, that's been approved. That element of not the 23 houses, and you know we are not doing any of that. We have no ambitions to do any of that. That is not anything to do with us.
Yeah.
So all we've taken is that drive, which is not to serve large houses. It is simply to serve this smaller development. So that's the first thing. And to your point on building works, I can understand that that's hugely disruptive, but I would ask you all to look at the bigger picture here, that we are introducing houses into a village where we have got a national housing crisis, and I appreciate you saying about houses that people can afford, but at the moment The only houses any of our children, and I've got 3, can afford is with the assistance of parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
You know, there are very few houses that our poor youngsters can actually afford. So what we're doing is creating houses that are sustainable, that are going to have very low management utility bills going forwards, because they have to comply with the Part L of the building regs, which is much more onerous than anything that's been built before, because we've got the COP30 in our
But
sights.
they can't afford them.
As I say, I mean, you know, we could argue about this, and I hear what you're saying, but if
Well,
there
why
are...
couldn't you have just say, if you were going to put 4 houses, why not say put 3 houses and 1 smaller house for someone? You know, just a 2 up, 2, not 2 up, 2 down, because obviously that's my great aunt Annie's, but
Yeah.
something that a newlywed
Yeah.
could have, or a partner, you know, 2 people from the village, both on earning.
Well,
Not
what
a
a
lot.
lot of youngsters are doing now is they're cohabitating. So they're actually buying properties like this and they're cohabitating. Now, I'm not saying that's ideal. I don't think the setup we have left for our children is ideal by any stretch of the imagination. But the point of the previous house, the large family house, it didn't sell. There's not a, you know, those houses are not selling at the moment. So you could have, their planning is established for that one house, but they're not going.
I didn't think much was selling at the moment.
No, exactly. I don't think those
Can I draw that to an end? Because we don't need really a debate on the need.
Okay, and then to the final point, I think, which is about drainage, instead of seeing this as kind of, you know, a worsening of the situation, I would see it as an opportunity. It sounds to me like you've got flooding issues anyway. As part of this application, post-planning, we have to put a robust drainage policy in. And because I advocate for sustainable homes, I would advocate for a treatment plant which would feed into the pond and wouldn't impact on your housing at all. But that is part of the post-planning application. Now, again, I can see your eyes rolling. I'm probably the wicked witch in the room, and I don't want to be that wicked witch. But I'm just pointing out things.
I don't agree with the idea. I just think it's a good way of doing it.
Well, it's very sustainable, and the water that comes out of those treatment plants you can actually drink from. You can laugh at me, but that is
Where's it going to go?
Where
You say
does
it
it?
comes out of there. Where's
If
it
our
going
place
to
gets flooded, we're left with a baby with a dirty nappy in them. You know we're around.
I have no grudge to
All
bear
right.
against any of you.
Can I just
Yeah.
draw that to a
Yeah.
halt? Okay.
I've just got to
May I
know.
make a point, please, Mr. Chairman? May I make a point, please?
Yeah,
I've
please
not
do.
heard everything that's said.
Please do, Mr. Williams, and then we'll have some questions from
I thought
councillors,
it's
I'm
covered
sure.
that. No, well, I want to make a point,
Please.
cover points, some points made by the people on my left here. I couldn't hear everything was said, but some of the points I simply want to raise and query. Do you want, can I say that?
I didn't hear what that was.
I have 3 points which I'd like to raise.
3 points.
Having
Raise, yes,
heard-
feel free.
Sorry?
Yes, please do, feel free.
Mr. Williams.
Right, I can hardly hear you actually, so forgive me.
I will shout more.
We need a loudspeaker, at least it's my hearing, I'm afraid, probably actually. Age does an effect upon you. There are 3 things actually. Firstly, when permission was given to build on that paddock, my field, I call it paddock, Ashford required that a significant improvement was made to the entrance to the driveway. It is currently certainly adequate, just about, to my car. Ashford wanted it widened. As far as I can understand, the plans to widen it have been approved. The second point is that I think we're talking about flooding, flooding on the paddock. I mean, I've lived in a house for 40 years, and all I can say is the pond at the far end of the paddock has never flooded.
You haven't lived there
It floods a
40
little
years.
bit into the garden of the cottage, which adjusts, is neighbouring to our paddock, but flooding, no. The pond has never flooded. And I suppose I have to say, actually, as a resident of Poplar Farmhouse, that as far as I'm concerned, and I speak probably also for my successors, the minor works involved here are not going to affect that house itself in any reasonable way. I don't think of the problem. From the point of view of the house, I would support the application as reasonable and not affecting me in any significant way.
Can I
Right,
just
3
speak?
points, thank you.
But you're at the other end.
I'm sorry.
You're at the other end of it. we're going to get the water.
Well, I think the water company,
Hold on, please. Let Mr. Williams
the
finish.
water company of your garden, I know, because I see it across
Yes.
the years. I mean, but it's not the pond flooding, it's because your garden is slightly
But what's
lower.
going to happen when you fill in, because you've
Uh,
got
you
this
use the
pond there that you've got filled in now
I
on your
can't hear, sorry.
design?
No,
It's very minor.
Hold on. Does Mr. Williams finish what he was wanting to say? Just carry on.
Well, I'm not sure where I am. The pond has never flooded, but by a long way. I mean, there's plenty of room for the water in the pond. Putting 4 houses on the side doesn't change the amount of water falling on the paddock. The pond will stay unflooded. Certainly, there's a bit of overreach of water into my neighbour's garden, except it's there. Very minor. But it certainly isn't flooding. I'd call it a large puddle in your garden.
Yeah, but your farmhouse won't get flooded, does it? If you higher elevation.
That's why I can't go.
Your farmhouse doesn't get flooded,
Well,
and
the
you're
pond-
well away. Your house is
Yeah, but
situated
the pond has
quite
never
a way
flooded.
away.
I've lived
Okay.
for 40 years and the
All right.
pond has never flooded.
We all know water goes downhill.
Point.
The problem that the planners can take into account, in my understanding, is that when you build the houses, you have runoff, and then you concentrate what's left onto a less amount of ground, and it's the way that is then handled. Whether it goes to the pond or not, what it will not be doing is sinking into the ground, soaking in the area where the houses were built, and obviously Tara knows that from her.
But no more rain falls on the paddock with the houses there or not there. It's
No,
still
but
rain.
there's less ground for it to soak into.
Exactly.
Anyway, let's move on
It's
from
hard
that.
surface.
Yeah.
So-
It can't soak in.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It can't.
It can't where the houses are, we know that. Now, councillors, if we go round, I've got some questions, but I think the key thing for us at this point, thank you very much for all the other comments. We want to question Tara on specifics that individuals have thought of, because once we close the public session, councillors are going to have to discuss between themselves without the benefit of your interventions to make their decisions. So if we start with your points, Alan.
There's a lot of information here, and there's quite a lot that troubles me, and there's quite a lot that interests me. Goodness, I don't actually know where to start, so I'm going to keep my powder dry at this point. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay. Sarah.
Right, I thought I saw as part of the application a letter from Highways to say they weren't happy with the access. Has that been superseded?
Our understanding, as I say, is that we copied and pasted pretty much the highways drawings that were done by Stansted, another company before we were on the scene, which was linked to that bigger development, because we knew that had been established and approved. So that's our starting point. I didn't want to make anything worse. I didn't want to change that because I knew that had been approved.
But there is a letter from Highways.
I've got one. I've got it here.
As part of your
I thought they
application.
had no problem with the previous
No, that was the
development.
previous one. I think to clarify this, as far as I'm with you, Sally, there is a letter from Highways. They are objecting to the access in various ways. They are being more, in my opinion, they are being more assiduous than they were for the 23 houses, which was a disgraceful abandonment of their obligations, in our opinion, and we made that very clear in the piece of work that went to the inspector that you may or may not have read. So KCC have objected on this occasion, to the extent that planning in Ashford may have given an approval, as you've told us, to what you are proposing. It was certainly not in the case of the 23 houses because they never approved it. They objected and it then went to appeal and was refused. They may have granted it, and I don't know, I haven't gone back to it, for the single house in the paddock, the 5-bedroom, but if they did, we shouldn't be moved off the idea that if they did approve it, planners, they approved it for one house, not 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, while we're on this point, and we come back to Sally then, I have an anxiety, and it was put to the inspector's thing before, which is that the splays that the planners, in your view, may have approved, that's a planning approval, they don't, your owner, who apparently owns the land you need, I'm not clear, and Mr. Williams can tell us whether he's bought the corner of Mr. Williams' garden for display on his side, and I'm led to believe in the past that he has not bought the land of Mrs. Buxton's corner.
Correct.
And the land registry shows them as having an absolute right angle corner. So while the planners may have agreed those displays, and I don't know that, it was for one house, and I don't think they have the access to the land that they've declared.
Correct.
So the only thing I can say to that is it's our understanding that that corner is actually under the ownership of Mr. Williams. Now that's not part of my remit if that's not the case. That was our understanding when we started.
Which corner do you mean now?
The neighbour of Mr. Williams.
Okay, Mrs. Buxton's side. That's not on the land registry drawing.
Right.
Now, land registry drawings are only as good as they are, you know, you can never be sure, but a right angle corner is a right angle corner. You know, it's not a case of whether the line is a bit this way or a bit that way.
Yeah.
It's a case of one does this and one does that, and it doesn't do that. So I think there is an issue there, but I take the way that you've approached it.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, that's sort of, we have to take on board the information we're given. If that information is incorrect, then by all means we can go back and address that.
Okay.
But we have to work the information we've been given.
Back to Sally.
Okay, so you'd be taking away part of Poplar Farmhouse garden to widen the access.
So that stretch of garden is at the moment shrubbery, but yes, in effect, yes.
Okay, and at the moment, at the top of the driveway, there's a two-bay garage, which I presume is used for Poplar Farmhouse parking.
At the top end?
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Where will Poplar Farmhouse be parking when the garage is gone
So
and the driveway is
my
gone?
understanding that Mr. Williams could step in, the garage that you've got permission for, there's a new garage that we have planning permission in place already for, which is again not part of my work, but that's been done separately and that's already established.
Eastern side of the garden, accessed through a widened version of the current front gates.
As I say, I can't comment on that because I'm not party to that.
That's right.
The front gate on Poplar Road.
The old iron ones.
And there was a new garage I can remember on the eastern side of
That's
Poplar
right.
Farm as well. So
That's the one we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's not shrubbery, it's brick walls. Sorry, there's not shrubbery in those corners. They're two brick walls.
So there are brick walls here. When I was talking about the shrubbery, I was talking about the shrubbery, just to show everyone, it's along the edge of the side. But there are indeed two brick walls. Yeah.
Any more, Sally?
That came from council a year or two ago.
Anything more from you, Sally?
Yeah, I just missed Kirby's point in the comments about the sewerage. You don't say in the plans how you're going to deal with the sewerage.
So it's not, we have not been asked for that at planning stage. That's something that we deal with post-planning, and the reason for that is it's unfair on our client to be forking out, because it costs a lot of money to do the surveys and the research, to be forking out all that money if we don't know if we've got planning or not. So that's why it's usually dealt with post-planning. But my particular practice, and I'm director of my own practice, are constantly pushing the sustainable agenda, and that includes recycling of rainwater, using natural, we've got a pond there, using natural habitat to recycle water for drainage, treatment plants. So we would, for our own reputation, be doing everything we can to assure that the drainage is dealt with in an ecological manner. That's one of the things we adhere to. Now, I can understand that you've never met me before. I was an architect who's come in. I don't live here, so I can understand your misgiving, your apprehensions about that. But that's, I can only say what I believe and what we do.
Okay, Sue.
No, Mum, I've been saying with Sally about the drainage point.
Okay, Colin.
One of the concerns that I have is the resiting of the garage. I'm the next door neighbour.
The other side.
The other side.
I have not played a part.
There has been never any discussions
by
David or anybody else concerning the effect it may or may not have on myself. The only discussion I had was with David's son at one stage.
can apologise, but I wasn't part of that.
I think
application.
this lines up to where you're in the middle of a situation where you're having to apologise for a number of issues that you've assumed that you've accepted or you haven't investigated so far.
Well, the planning application for the garage was done by someone else, not us, and that was established before we started.
Established by whom?
By Mr. Williams.
Ashford Borough Council have approved the building of the garage 2 years ago.
Yes, I know they approved the David. That wasn't the question. The question was, did you seek support or not from your next door neighbour? Because it will affect the front of your building to a great extent.
So are you calling into question the planning application permission given? You should be, what, refused, returned, refused?
I'm just saying, I'm just making a statement, David, that there's a number of comments being made that there is no satisfactory solution at this point in time, including taking the trouble to talk to your neighbours about what you're going to do.
So just on planning, it's law that when you put in an application, that the council, the local authority, notifies the neighbours. So if there's
No,
been,
they did not in this occasion.
but you cannot
we did
push
not.
that onto Mr. Williams because it's a local
That
authority remit.
That may be so, but I'm using that as an instance that what everybody else is saying is, you're talking here this evening, and there's a lot of premises going on that this has been accepted already or not. And it makes it very difficult for the parish council in that bay to take any matters forward.
Jeremy?
Okay, sorry, hold on.
I mean, I understood matters, Colin. The planning application for the garage in front of Poplar Farm went through this committee 2 years ago, and it's not our choice as to who is written to. That's the planning team, and they sometimes write to all the neighbours, but more commonly they write to the immediate neighbours either side.
Yes.
Which I don't know whether they did, but COVID did interfere with that process, and I think that's probably what happened then.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that this committee did discuss it, and it went.
And I think I'm right in saying we objected to it.
We did object to it, but the planners, you're absolutely right, but the planners did pass it, so that's nothing we can interfere with at this stage.
I assume that, but I'm using that in evidence in terms of what is being discussed this evening is a number of issues where there's no resolve at this point in time. And I feel sorry for this young lady because
I do as well, but that particular point is resolved because there's nothing we can do. The planning application.
I think that was given in respect of permission given to a 5-bedroomed house, and it was on the condition. Am I right? Oh, excuse me. In thinking that was the condition.
It was for a 5-bedroom, one property.
I didn't remember that there was a condition, and I didn't know the planners did that.
Yes. I'm pretty certain. I'd have
There
to
was
go back.
there was a multi-stage process. There was an and I don't know the exact order, but there was the application for the 5-bedroom house. There was an application to break in to the garden from the lane up the side and put a garage, a small one, on that side of the garden, the western side. And then later on, that was revised to an application to a garage on the eastern right-hand side with access through the front gates, which would be widened. Now, those things have all happened. We did object. Council, Ashford Planning Authority gave what it gave, and I take the point that other people are making. It's not directly relevant in the sense that the application was granted and it's not yours, and as long as they comply with the conditions, they could still build that, much to our annoyance, because we didn't like it. I think Colin is drawing a broader point, which is that it sets a poor starting point, albeit that may not really, in fairness, be a planning condition. We will consider our views, and that's all it is, to object or support or any conditions we want to propose on this application rather than this garage in the garden. The fact is that we didn't like the garage in the garden, we still don't like it, and we will not be pleased to see it happen as a result of your scheme. That is unfortunate for you, but the fact is that one leads to another.
I understand.
I came to this committee a year ago and discussed my current garage, and it decided to be unsafe and therefore had to come down. That point was put to Ashford by council, they accepted that, and they agreed the permission to build a new garage, as is pointing out.
And that's how it
So they haven't changed.
Because that was put up, I'll let you know why, that was put up without planning permission. I will let you know that. The Dores actually did that, David. They built that garage and a stable without permission.
So, again, just to answer that.
Going back many years now, I don't think
The
we need to
garage
worry
you're
about
talking
that.
about, you're talking about your garage.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm telling you it was put up without planning
So when-
permission.
Not-
Years
What,
ago.
40 years ago?
Yes, it got over 40 years ago.
But before I came?
Yes.
Oh, I think it was there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's not go
Very
down.
interesting.
Yeah, let's not go
Oh,
down that
right.
one because we've gone an hour and 3/4. Sorry, not. We've gone 40 minutes. I didn't mean an hour then. I was going to say 45 minutes, but we've gone 40 minutes. That clock's fast. Okay, we've done your side, and Colin's
I'm fine.
spoken, so now we're on to Leslie.
Well, for brevity, I share Liz and other councillors' concerns about access, particularly the sewage. You know my concerns about the sewage, or lack of it, in the village. The only other thing which probably wait for the discussion between councillors is I take issue, I dispute your idea that there can't be affordable housing for young people in this village. There are means to provide it through housing associations and other local initiatives. I don't think for a moment, from what you've said, you've even considered really any alternative to the standard nuclear family 3-bedroom house, which frankly these days is not necessarily what people want or need. And my main issue would be for any development going on in this village, that unless there is provision made for truly affordable housing for local people, I would not support it.
Okay, well we'll get to that. Thank you. Paul?
Thank you. I've just got a couple of points of clarification. If I misheard, forgive me, but this pond, in the plans that you've got, Tara, is it planned to fill it in?
No.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure.
This is what
I
I'm
wasn't
slightly
sure.
puzzled.
I wasn't sure because
There is no,
because
as I
we all
say-
know that this island, which is of course made of clay, so these drainage problems are not restricted to that part. You know, they're all over the place. Dew ponds, larger ones, etc., everywhere. When we get a drought, they dry out. When we get a flood, I mean, it's a way of life. And clay, it doesn't drain. And I've yet to come across anyone in this village who's got perfect drainage in their garden or their house. Notwithstanding that, I think it's really important to recognise the concerns if you are on a lower level, and therefore at a later stage when we talk about it, it's a point I will make about that. It is a real challenge. Because one of the things I spotted was no foul drainage, you know, and I understand why, because the current protocol is that's decided afterwards, because I'm just uncomfortable with that. I just think it's a nonsense these days, because in this village also we do have a major problem. It's in some cases it's less than is sometimes articulated, in others it's more. One day we'll hopefully, you know, don't hold your breath, but we might get something sorted out on that. I'm not on mains drainage, so I'm one of the people that has a treatment plant, works really, really well. I just thank God I'm not on mains drainage because we don't have the same problem. But that was one point. The other points that I just wanted to make, and that's been also addressed, which is about this the entrance displays, because the first time round, highways were just completely washing their hands of any involvement, any support, completely nonsensical, and I wasn't aware that so they now flipped. Probably a change of personnel or something, and they've now felt, golly gosh, if we've got 440 vehicles, dust carts, whatever, going in and out, that is a real anxiety spot there.
You're talking about the previous application?
Yeah, the very first one.
So that's not part of
No, I know
it.
that, but the cutting and pasting is maybe where that might have come from originally. I don't know, but I haven't got anything more to add to ask the public at this stage.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
I've got a few to get clarification from Tara. Partway down the track on the Poplar Farmhouse side, if I understood your drawing correctly, Tara, and I I noticed you put some things in red, which I deduced you meant were being removed, but I couldn't find a key to
Correct.
say that. It may be something that architects always do, but I always think that it's better to explain them so there isn't a squabble later. But partway along that track, you appear to be removing some fence, and I wasn't sure why.
Correct. So as I say, we took the previous approved driveway and put it on ours. There was a pinch point on that driveway for safety reasons, so that you don't get two
Sure.
cars clashing at the road end. And you're quite right. There's an element of fencing that's been removed. That's quite right. And there's space at the front end. And I mean,
Was that fencing then being removed to open up the pinch point? I didn't see it looking as though it was doing that, but maybe it was.
That's, you know, as I said, that's
It's towards Poplar Road. It's sort of the Poplar Road end of a fence, and it sort of bends slightly, and it's being removed. I didn't fathom that out. Maybe I just missed an obvious point.
Well, the previous application, the key reason of that display is to make it safer, irrespective of whether it was
That's a display.
one or four
I'm
houses.
talking further north.
Further north. So there's the point and then it
About 2
broadens.
panels, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very detailed point, but I just didn't
Yeah,
understand.
I don't know if that impacts.
All right, let's go on to the next point. The form says you own all the land. I've already mentioned this point about displays, which I questioned whether you own.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, well, in fact, that's tied in with the next one, because I think this is quite important for a different subject on the agenda, which Mr. Williams has come for. In some way, according to the form, that land of the paddock has either been transferred, or there's an option, or there's a something or other that gives that control of that land to your client. And I take it that is not a Williams client, it's someone completely different.
I don't understand.
I mean, it's not just part of the Williams family, it's actually the land has gone somewhere else, has it?
Well, it's an option agreement. So
It's an option.
I can't really, again,
No,
it's not
I know
within
this
my
is commercial. I know this is commercial.
remit.
The reason I'm asking is because we're later going to be discussing Mr. Williams' request that we consider supporting by putting a trustee into a charity that he would like to set up. And what I'm keen to avoid, and we will probably want to take advice from our association anyway, is that this council should not be considering a planning application which still has a link to a different proposal. In other words, we should not be saying, well, what about these houses? Oh, well, of course, there's also this very nice idea that Mr. Williams has got for an educational fund. I shouldn't call it a charity because he's told me already. A fund. I want to make sure that there is a cutout there and that the land is really nothing to do with the Williams family anymore. But you're saying it's an option.
I can't, there are certain questions I'm not qualified or in a position to answer. You know, we've been given this brief, we've done the design, we're architects, we're not lawyers or... so I wish I could
it's
give
a
you
question
clarity
you've
on
given
that.
me the only answer you can, which is all right. I don't
I'm
expect
afraid I
to get
can't
it.
give you any...
No, I don't expect to get an answer to all of them, but
Okay.
I'll ask the question.
Okay.
Can I just carry on and you come back
For
at
sure.
the end? We've talked about removing the brick walls, and there are concerns about that. The removal of the garage that Mr. Williams has, because that's going to be part of the access. That's something that also is in red, so I think it disappears.
Yes, I mean, the red in
And a tree.
speak is
And a tree
demolition.
behind it.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, okay. The highways issues that we raised before, this council, for the 23 houses still apply. They just don't necessarily apply as severely for the 4 houses. But also, as has been said, KCC have raised issues now. They seem to have considered it better. And they've certainly got questions about that access. So if you haven't studied their letter...
I haven't seen their letter, and I will look at it.
It's on the portal.
Thank you.
I wondered about your solar panels, the 5 to 7 on each roof. I mean, that's such a small number, it's kind of not going to pull the skin off a rice pudding as far as electricity is concerned.
In the summer it will. But,
in the summer it will a bit, in the
as,
winter it'll do nothing.
Well, as with all solar panels.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's not going to make much difference. I was going to ask you about the connection to the main sewer. Will it be achieved? You're saying you haven't designed it yet. It could be a main sewer, it could be a packaged plant.
Well, I would want to work with the community to make sure that whatever we do is something that everyone's happy with. I'm not here to create, discontent in the village. I'm here to try and improve things. And for me, this is an opportunity to improve things. And you might sit there saying, well, you would say that. But I genuinely think, coming from outside, and I appreciate I'm an outsider in this instance, I feel that entrance would be much safer for children in particular. And I feel there seems to be a flooding issue in this village anyway. And that what we're doing here is building 4 homes that won't be flooding, that will have a treatment plant, as your councillor has said, which works incredibly well.
So long as you can deal with the runoff. He's in the country, by the way. He's no problem with his runoff.
But we have kept the pond, which is also a point of drainage for clean water that treatment plants provide. We've kept we've only lost 1 tree on the whole. Sorry, 2 trees on the whole site. So we are doing our best.
And you'll be putting more water into the pond than goes there at the minute, because we've reduced less soaking into the ground because you built houses on it, and all the clean water that comes in from South East Water is going to head off through the treatment plant into the pond. So the pond's going to get fuller than it did before, logically.
If you give us an opportunity to work together, we can help to improve things for everyone. But that decision's in your hands.
In which way?
For everyone's benefit.
No, I mean, sorry, in which way would you improve it?
Because we would have a discussion with the neighbours, with consultants who specialise in drainage, to make sure that whatever we do is going to help everyone. The last thing I want is to create a development that's going to affect neighbours in a detrimental way. Why would I want that?
So I think it's fair then. I mean, we've got to get to when the council discusses this. But whether we decide to support or whether we decide to object, we might reasonably put in a proposal to Ashford that a condition is placed on anything they grant, should they decide to do it, that you've actually got to solve this surface water problem without it all landing on the pond. In other words, if it goes into the pond's got to have a runoff somewhere else.
I think that would be a very good idea.
It's got to get past Corner House.
I actually wholeheartedly support that.
Can I just say something?
Please.
White Cottage and Corner Cottage are listed buildings, so we've got to protect them for the future. It's all right as saying she's going to do this and that with the pond, but we all know water goes downhill, don't we? I know I'm going back over something, but
you can change the direction, and I do know people.
Architectural buildings that would fall down, dearie.
Yeah, but with respect, you can change the direction, and I think Tara did make a point that she's listened, and that needs to be looked at and evaluated and raised with the council. And Jeremy also said that when we get to that, we'll make that point. There are people in the village who have put in French drains, and that's a technique to reduce flooding, particularly, and that goes all over the Isle of Oxley.
Because who pays for that, mate?
Well, in those, I don't recall you paying for any of the drainage in the village.
Well, no, it's been flooded out the front during the winter.
Well, I think that, with respect, I think the drainage. I suggested when I spoke earlier on, I thought it was very important to consider it. So please don't misunderstand me that I'm trying to brush this under the carpet. But I do think it's fair to hear what Tara just said about the fact that she's taken on board it's an area that we have great concern about, all of us, and she's going to be looking into that. And also the chair has made the point that we're going to raise that when we put our submission into the council.
We could if council's good.
Yes, sorry, you're absolutely right.
I think it would be very good to have it as a condition of planning that the drainage
that's what I'm saying. And just one other quick thing, please. Reference the site entrance if it goes ahead. The damage in the road, who puts that right? Kent County Council or the developers?
I wouldn't want to comment on that at all, given the state of the roads in the county.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Sadly, that's not stopping construction across the county of any kind.
Any works to the driveway would be done by
the driveway. I'm talking about the road.
It's the roads. We're not.
Any damage would have to be
Can I just sort of say, as a point of fact, with regard to the overflowing of the pond in the current situation as it stands, it does flood into the Lloyd's Green field where they proposed that. So when it's in the winter and when there's lots of, it does flood through that fence and out into that field as well. So that is quite extensive.
Of course, this could be a big opportunity for the village.
I'm just saying.
Because
so
right now we've got a
just
problem.
so we know what it is now, how it is.
But right
That's
now we've
how
got a
it's
problem.
already.
If this wasn't even in discussion and wasn't, we'd still have the problem we have right
yeah.
now. The threats to Corner Cottage, the threats to White Cottage, the threats to the field and what have you. We have a big issue in the village. And somehow, if we can raise the issue much higher with respect than the 4 properties or 5 property areas, we need to address that overall. And Leslie's absolutely right. The whole drainage issue is something that actually I'm really encouraged by people coming in tonight, because I'm sure you're going to get behind us absolutely 4 square when we're going to take this forward with Southern Water and South East Water and what have you, because it's an issue we've got to address in the village. And part of it lies in our own keeping, by the way, because if you do an analysis of what's blocking up the drains, we all know what it is.
And does the
No,
village
I'm not saying
need...
it's... No, don't misunstand me. You know where I'm coming from, and you and I agree on
That's
this.
apathy, I'm afraid.
Well, we need to change that.
Yeah,
If people can get interested in the issues that we're talking about tonight, we need to channel that so the wider issues are taking us. And I think the point that Tara's made is a very valid one. You know, that she will champion looking into it, and she's actually gone on record tonight saying it's a really good suggestion.
So who's benefiting from this development, I'd like to know? Who's actually really, what really is the intention behind this development, and who is really going to benefit?
Well, I think there's an opportunity, and again, you know, there's an opportunity for everyone to benefit. One of the key ways in a clay soil to mitigate flooding is to plant trees, and there's an opportunity.
Tree keeps them alive. It used to be in the summer.
You know, if you
All right, can we just bring this one to an end then, please? Because we spent a very long time on it. I think we've covered all the points. If councillors are happy, we'll move on now to the next planning application, because that was only the first one, but it was, to be fair, the big one. We have now got Furness Farmhouse down the street. Does anyone want to speak on Furness Farmhouse? I think the answer from before was no.
No.
So that's it, we won't ask any questions. And then land adjacent to 1617 Lloyd's Green, which I know Jill said she wanted to mention. It's gone to appeal for non-determination, but actually it has been determined. Meanwhile, it has been refused. But the decision letter is not on the portal.
No, I did wonder that. I couldn't find it. I thought perhaps I'm missing something.
They haven't put it there, or the new system is falling apart.
Oh, yeah, it is.
But either way, I don't actually think there's anything for us to say. We put in a fairly long series of stuff before.
I don't think anything's changed.
Councillors may decide they'd like to make more comments when we get to it in the meeting, but I think probably not.
I think the only thing I'm going to highlight, which I haven't before, is the amount of errors in the forms for the appeal. Like, is it in the A or B? No. Beg to differ. So yeah, there's quite a few errors in that form. So,
okay.
That.
Now, the other thing then was Mr. Williams's fund. Was there something else that you raised? No, that's it. So, Mr. Williams, talk to us about your proposals for the fund. And could I ask you to keep it just a short period?
Sorry?
Just a short period, please.
I forgot to say it, in theory anyway. Well, essentially, I'm here to persuade the PC that I would like one of your members to become a trustee on this fund which I propose setting up. It's a called Learning Fund, in memory of my wife who died 2 years ago. There are 3 elements to it: scholastic, if you like, technical and vocational. Scholastic, for instance, paying for school fees, musical instruments, tuition, whatever it may be. We have the idea for technical in the sense that I think it might be very, very useful for somebody, something in the village, to provide older people especially with ability to use IT. The older you are, the less you're able to use it these days. We pay for somebody, in fact, on a monthly basis, for instance, come along and teach people how to use IT equipment. And the third element is vocational. For instance, buying toolkits for plumbers who are starting courses, painting, anything like that, simplification to it. There are three elements, in fact, to what we call learning. The funding for this is that essentially we as a family intend putting forward £50,000 as a capital base from which the fund can live. We expect to get contributions, and the family also will be paying into the fund about £1,200 a month for almost forever, essentially, to get a bit of extra cash. The idea of the fund essentially is that it's going to be long living, i.e. the capital is not going to be used to allow distribution. The fund itself will keep its capital and earn interest on it. £50,000 worth is expected to earn about £2,000 a year. We expect to get other contributions, including more from my family, and hopefully also from local businesses. There are about 60 businesses operating on the Isle of Oxney. This is the Isle of Oxney Fund, not just Wittersham Parish Council. If you look, I've distributed a graph that shows the expected cash coming into the fund. This year, from 2023, there's nothing at all. £1,000 will come in from the family to get the thing started in anticipation of the fund, the charity being approved by the commissions. Next year, 2024, I've made the point, of course, that it's important, as I said, that the capital remains undisturbed. The capital, the money to spend on grants and what have you, comes from the interest earned, and plus any money coming into the fund from charitable donations of one sort or another, including the family and the Williams family charitable contribution. In 24, you see, in fact, starting off with £100 capital, all that's left from this year, the £50,000 goes in. That earns £2,004 interest, £1,450 from the family, and allows for about £250 only from businesses in this locality. That means essentially out of the £3,500 available, 3,109 can be distributed, and £245 goes into the fund. I stress the fact I'm looking to this to be a long-term fund. You've heard of probably heard of the Ger Greer charity in the village. Oh, yeah. That was founded in 1860 and still goes on, I'm glad to say. I would like this to last just as long. Year by year, if you look down the left-hand side of the capital balance, you see in fact that by the 2030, the capital's gone up to 52,193. Extrapolated forward, in fact, admittedly to 55, the capital goes up to 61,405 pounds. And if you look to the right-hand side, available for giving, the giving this year will only be £900, which comes from the seed money put in by the family, and goes up to £3,184 in 30. And eventually it goes up to £3,500 a year, and the capital going up to £61,900. Looking at the long term, of course, and it is a long term, it means in fact that in the time span which I'm looking at here, the fund in 30 years will be dishing out for £100,000 in gift aid to those who apply, and will have a capital remaining of £61,000. It goes on. That's the financial side of it. Now, as far as trustees are concerned, the family is setting up the fund in the first place, and we expect the chairman in the first place to be from the family, but we then expect or hope to get 4 local organisations to provide trustees. And because we want, looking at it the long term, I hope, in fact, to persuade organisations as opposed to the individual to provide the trustees. And the 4 are yourselves, Wittersham Parish Council, Stone Parish Council, the school, including a headmaster or teacher, and a priest from the local clergy, who normally would expect to preach in either Stone or Wittersham. One hopes, in fact, that those four nominated organisations will provide trustees, and of course, from my point of view, the longevity is provided by the fact they are your organisations. And when somebody retires, you, as an organisation, can hopefully persuade somebody else from yourself to take over. So therefore, I'm hoping, in fact, that the financial side is catered for in the sense that the capital remains undisturbed and will increase. From the trustees' point of view, going to organisations means, in fact, hopefully that also the organisation will continue to exist because the trustees come from organisations which itself hopefully will continue.
Okay.
Right, well, that's it really. I hope to persuade you that you will, as an organisation, parish council, provide a trustee. Stone applies to Stone, the school and the local clergy.
Thank you for that. What I said earlier, I think we will probably want to, or related to it, we probably want to discuss it with our association just to make sure that there are no wrinkles that we don't know about, putting a trustee onto a financial charity of your sort of fund, sorry. I mean, it'll be a CIO, I saw that, Charitable Incorporated Organisation. I saw that's in the plan. I was slightly surprised, and I take it your solicitor's been involved in this, has he?
Sorry?
Has your solicitor been involved in this?
Not yet, no.
Because it suggested that the chairman would get a £1,000 a year payment. Now, if it was an ordinary charity rather than a CIO, which is the proposal, that's not allowed in my understanding.
Well, it's changed.
In a CIO, is it allowed?
No, it's both changed. Yeah,
Okay.
you can.
Right.
You can remunerate trustees these days. I mean,
really?
historically it wasn't done because
Wasn't
it was seen as a conflict of interest, and people did that as a charitable contribution, if you
It's
like.
a long time in the future, as far as we can see. It should get bigger, presumably.
Yeah.
And hopefully, in fact, the chair, combining the job of treasurer and chair, will have quite a lot to do. And in the long term, years ahead, but we're putting it in the foundation paper, if you like, to allow it to happen, if it's agreed by the trustees.
Okay, thank you.
That's not
Good
included
point.
in the figures though.
No.
The salary is not included in the figures.
Sorry?
The salary is not included in your figures.
No, not there, no.
Okay.
No. Because the figures don't include the period in which it's expected to occur.
I thought it was after the first year.
The first year?
Yeah.
It sort of says after the first few years. I think.
Okay.
No.
I mean, without...
It's up to the trustees in the end to decide whether or not the chairman is liable to be paid anything at all. The trustees must decide, not the chairman. And that looks to the future. At the time when the charity, the fund, well, I keep on saying charity, the fund will be active enough, causing a lot of work, and therefore it's reasonable to provide the chairman with some sort of remuneration to cover the particular costs of an expanding organisation.
When you were speaking just a moment ago, you said the family would contribute £1,200 a month, but it's £1,200 a year, isn't it?
Actually, yeah.
£12 a year.
Yeah. The time.
Really, for a very long time.
Does anyone else want to ask Mr. Williams any questions? Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for your delivery, David. One or 2 points, just really for informational comparison. As you know, there is the Jeremiah Greenland Trust in the village, which I think was set up in 1832.
No, what time?
I think it was set up in 1832.
No, I thought 1860.
But anyway, and I mean, I'm actually a trustee of the Jeremiah Greenland.
Right.
Now, I did some calculations not that long ago, and when Jeremiah Greenland set it up, he put in a few £100.
Right. That's a long time ago.
A long time ago. And that should now be worth, if all things were being looked at carefully by the trustees, and the distribution had been reasonable, it should now be worth several £100,000.
Yes.
But it isn't.
No.
So something's gone wrong between 1832 and now, because it doesn't have very much money.
Well, I hope they correct that by setting up the system I've decided.
Indeed. So that's just a word of caution. And secondly, I mean, I think it's another laudable idea to have our local priest or as a trustee, we've got to be a little bit careful because we have a rector and a vicar, and they have 9 parishes, and it's easy just to say, let's get the priest to be on the committee of this, that, and everything else. To be honest, they're more or less sinking under a mountain, and I just ask you to go back and think that through a little bit more, because actually, is it fair to do that?
Right. I must
Could be the church
no
board
comment.
Well, I wasn't a bid. Don't misunderstand me. It wasn't a bid, but it's just an observation, and the church warden is already overloaded.
The sinking metaphor is not restricted to the clergy.
Okay. Right, thanks for that, Alan. Can we say that we've asked Mr. Williams all the questions we want, and thank you for the presentation. So can I close the public session? And thank you everyone for your contributions. Now, we'll go back to the council then, so you can't in the public seats comment anymore, just leave it to council, but you are all entitled to stay and hear our discussions right through to the end, or any point you want. So, we will go back to the agenda then, and we'll confirm the minutes of the last meeting, I hope, which was on the 13th of June.
Yes.
Let me put this back in the right place before I get muddled. Yeah, right. Was everybody happy with the minutes as they stood?
Yes.
Yes. Can I therefore sign them?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Right, that is done. Matters arising. First thing then is the ACRK update. For those listening in the public seats, that's the action with communities in rural Kent. Action with communities in rural Kent, which was a charity which went defunct at Christmas. A draft constitution has been produced by the consultant. She's consulting on it with ACRE, the head of ACRE. Some potential trustees for the new organisation she's identified, and she's asking them as well. After that, it'll be submitted to the Charity Commission for them to consider. I believe it takes them 2 or 3 months to do, and of course maybe come back with issues. But it would be nice if it was approved, ready for them to start up in the autumn. It's been a long time, 9 months, but that's how it is. I'm expecting to meet the consultant and the Chief Executive of Calc again at the end of next week for a catch-up and find out what's happening. There's other things that she wants to tell me. We haven't heard any news yet on why I think it's called the Kent Charities Foundation, I know it's 3 letters beginning with a K, why their grant wasn't forthcoming after they seemed to think it was going to be all right. I haven't got an answer on that. I might get it next week, which was rather disappointing. Okay, next subject is the Highways Improvement Plan update. Now, Yvonne and I had a Teams meeting today with the KCC Highways officers, and we were given the results of the speed survey that they carried out on Peening Quarter Road the other week, and also Wittersham Road to Rolvenden, seemingly. And just to not go into any great detail, but on Peening Quarter Road, the average speed over 7 days was 38.8 miles an hour one way, 39.7 the other. The 85th percentile speeds, that's to say the ones that 85% fall within, and I did ask them a technical question on that and they didn't have the answer, and the clue in fact. 45.8 one way, 46.6 the other. So it means that either, depending on their answer that they didn't have, either 15% or 7.5%, whichever it is, one tail, 2 tails, are actually exceeding 46 miles an hour along there, but the average is only just under 40. Now actually, and on the road to Rolvenden, fairly similar, in the same bracket. Interestingly, they got 7,300 vehicles one way on Peeling Quarter Road. It's not clear whether that was in a week or while it was installed, okay? And 7,481 the other way. And Rolvenden, more, which I'm very surprised by, 9,154 and 8,977. Very surprised there's more going to Rolvenden.
That was probably that series of bizarre road
Oh,
trades.
yes.
Diverting everything to Rolvenden when we all knew the road was clear. Rather than
Maybe that's why they indeed, they were going slowly. Anyway, so they've done that survey, and rather to our happy surprise, they've said that they think that's actually quite good for a 40 limit. They looked at 50 and they said no point in that, we can do 40. That's to be sort of further considered, but I mean it's further considered with a view to doing it rather than to saying no later, as we understand it. It's not been fully designed, but they've talked to the designer, the engineer. Now we have got to go off and poll everyone around there to see if they're happy with that. Of course there will be people who are not happy, mostly not living in that particular street. But we need to find out that there's not going to be a host of objections, because if there are a host of objections, they'd rather not start on it. Now, another point of great interest, especially to the councillor on my right, is that subject to further consideration, they've decided, having talked to the designer, that the limit should run for the full length of the houses in Peeling Quarter Road. In other words, right down to the last cottage on the right.
Yeah.
And this way, instead of starting in Peeling Quarter Road near the bend, they said no, they think it ought to come up into Poplar Road and do that whole stretch. And they would start that at the first bungalow as you come into Wittersham. Or finish it, whichever way. Yeah, depending which way you go. In other words, it would come as far as, it would come past you and come to the first bungalow and stop there.
Sharpland. Well, no, Sharplands is the furthest one, isn't it? It's the one.
It's the first one you come to.
Where you go down to.
Kingston.
Yeah. Past you.
No, Sheepwash.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The idea being that they've got to stop it there because they need enough distance for not having a limit before it starts again in the village. They don't like having them like they have in France, where you go 30, 50, 30, 50, 30, 50, 60, 30, you know, every 10 yards.
So we'll be going 30, 50, 40?
No, there won't be a 50. There will be a 30, 60 national limit, then a 40, and then back up to a 60 until you get to 10 to them when it goes to 50.
So basically everyone will be throttling open along Poplar Road.
Well, they might do.
Like they do at the moment. Okay.
They might do, but basically the good thing about this is that it would be putting a 40 limit around the double bend. And possibly, they're saying, but they haven't decided this, go a short distance down Wittersham Road towards Rolvenden, so that the 40 limit applies to all three parts of the junction. They don't want people to come to the junction and hit the 40, they'd rather them hit it a little bit earlier. Now, let's bear in mind that the average, of course, are only doing 40 anyway. And as they said, there will be some people who won't do 40 afterwards either. But it's a step in the right direction. I think we know there was a petition in Peeling Quarter Road, so people ought to approve of this, I hope locally, but we've got to go and see. They are quite happy to think about the horse warning signs that we asked for, you know, warning horses in the road, but they've got to look at the verges to see whether they can legally place them. And that's sort of all matter of technical issues about where they can put them and where they can't. And we did hear a bit of it, but it just is mind-blowing. They can only go on verges that are maintained at public expense, even if they're not maintained at public expense. Got it? Now they are potentially willing to pursue that project. They did say it would not meet requirements for them funding it. It would not come up on their radar. They're quite happy with it as it is. But they're very happy to do it for us. That means that I'm afraid the majority of the costs would need to be met by the PC. Their wet finger broad expectation of the costs is somewhere around 10,000 or a bit more.
10 to 15.
10 to 15, but 10 a bit more. That is, I can give you details, it's about 3,000 for the traffic regulation order, which is a legal thing they have to do. It's about 600 if it needs to go to the Joint Transportation Board, but they don't think it would. There would be £1,000 design fee. There's the money for the signs, and putting them up. So they felt around that money. Now, obviously, that's up to us whether we want to do it. We would hopefully get a bit back from. We would certainly ask Mike Hill whether he would give us a bit of his members' grant, but his members' grant money is a lot less than it used to be. It's been reduced from, I think it used to be 25,000, it's come down to about 3 and a bit. Highways department's own money budget for HIPs is 10,000 across the whole of Ashford for the year. So in other words, there's not much in there. They did point out they've already paid for the survey, which I think was a fair point to make. I don't know how much they spend on them, but they've done that. We would also possibly get some money from Johnny Shilton's grant money. We could ask him anyway. But the question really is that, I mean, I think this is something we've really been looking to do, to get this limit. I think it's a good result that we have the opportunity of getting it, but it will cost us money. Now, we don't know how much, and we're not going to agree it tonight, obviously, that we will definitely do it, but they would like to know that we are broadly speaking on for doing it. My own view, for what it's worth, is that I think this is actually a win, that we can, say we have got something and we can afford it if we wish to do it. It's a pity that we should spend money on the highway when they are the highway authority, but they've made it clear that even if they had money, this would not be a priority for them. It's only for us that it really matters, and our residents. Let's see what else I've said here. Now, the other thing is, there's a negative to all of this. That's the speed limit. We had another go, Yvonne and I, at great length, the grass down to the hairdressers.
Yes.
They are absolutely no way will they ever agree it. Even if we could get an answer from the hairdressers to stop the cars parking in front of where the path would go to, the telegraph pole would still be enough to block it, and the chances of moving the telegraph pole with the electric wires on it is nil. They've said that somewhere else where they need to move 2 poles, UK Power Networks want over £100,000. Because it's not moving the poles, it's redoing all the wires because they're then the wrong length.
And they would put them underground.
And they'd really take the opportunity to put them underground instead and ask us to pay for it. So, because that's the long-term project. So, unfortunately, we have got no chance. I mean, we've had a really good go at it. They've agreed with some of the points we make, like people walking the road anyway, and we will save them doing that and give them a path to walk on. Yes, I know, but it will be our fault when they walk in the road round the car and get run over. But they do that already. Yeah, but that's not our fault. I said that is ridiculous, and they said, yeah, we know, that's the way it is.
Can you just remind me who is responsible for maintaining that little strip of grass?
Who knows? I think it's probably our land, but under highways control.
Okay, so does that bearing in mind they've still got a dilemma over signs for horses, putting it on land they're supposed to look after, and even if they don't look after, they're supposed to be looking after it.
We're trying to deal with it logically now.
I'm just saying to myself that if who's currently mowing it?
We do.
Right. So if the person who we employ to mow it decides to treat it in a different way, maybe put some gravel down or some weed killer or some, what do you call that little vermiculite or what, I don't know what it is, and we just create a path there, right? I mean, what are they going to do?
Get quite
well, what are they going to do if we're maintaining it and our professional decides that he's going to maintain it in a different way? I mean, at this rate, what was it they were going to charge £1,000 for designing a sign with a horse on it?
Yeah.
I'm sure between us we could have done one of those. You know, any of us what Blue Peter years ago, we've got a cereal packet
The
out.
design was designed at the speed limit.
Okay, well there's a similar principle. I think.
Isn't there a set design?
What?
Yes, there must be.
Isn't there a template for that? Does he
Yes.
model off and about?
They'll buy signs off of a sign maker.
You can buy them on Amazon, right? But that's not the point. I think with this pathway, it's one of those things that Ealing would have made a comedy out of it in 1950. It's ludicrous.
Right.
We're responsible for that piece of.
No, we're
land.
not. We take responsibility.
We take responsibility.
We take responsibility, right? And I think we should take the initiative. And
I
it's
think
something
if
we've
you've got
talked about for
gravel
years.
there,
Yeah.
The cars will just park closer to the house.
Yeah.
And people
Okay.
come
Well,
there
then
quite
we take Alan's idea outside his house when he managed to liberate some World War II tank traps. Right? No one ever can park outside Alan's house because these things are that shape. And I'm not suggesting to do exactly the same, but surely we can come up with some sensible solution, because otherwise it's like breaking the butterfly on a wheel. We've revisited this for year after year after year. We've got back quotes when the cost of living is going through the roof of £100,000 there and £1,000 there, what have you. And there's an element of sensibility. I don't do anything but applaud your tenacity and your time listening to these individuals. Individuals. But I don't see, you know what, it just seems to me there's probably other ways of doing this when it's down to people's safety.
Their view is, from their sort of regulation side, that the only thing that they can encourage people to do is to cross the road and use the path the other side. They'll put in a drop curb, which we would definitely not pay for. We've told them it would be a waste of money because no one will use it. But from their point of view, they see that as being the thing that they can safely encourage people to do, even though they'll be crossing on a bend just by the corner.
And would then have to cross back
Yeah.
again when they went to the school or the church or the village hall.
They know it's mad, they're just not in a position to agree it. Anyway, I mean, we can
Well,
have a go with
anyhow,
that.
that's just my suggestion.
Indeed. Right, so that's speeding, and that seems to be a positive step forward. What are people's views about us spending some substantial money, which we have got, but some substantial money on putting that speed limit in if it all goes through? Because they don't want to start on it without, first of all, we make sure we're not going to get objections, and secondly, that we are signing up to, once they tell us what the actual bill would be, minus anything we can get from others.
I'm in favour of it, whether I can actually comply with it.
You better watch out.
But I'm willing to try to learn.
Sally, what do you think?
Spirit.
Yeah, I'm in favour of spending.
Sue?
Yes.
Yes.
So actually, I said to them I couldn't speak for councillors, but I thought personally it was a reasonable thing because we can sit here all year and not actually achieve as much as that on other things. It is a win, and we know that the resident. It's a perfectly fair case compared to the ones that they've been scratching around elsewhere in Kent. He's got a better case, but that's not the way they see it.
No.
Okay, thank you. So, the next thing, there's my agenda, here we are. Next thing then is the bus shelter update. For you?
Well, only in as much as
You've put it in.
we put it in the outlook, and I've
Is it
just
there?
seen that yes, it is in the
Good.
outlook.
Mhm.
But obviously it's only just come out, so
Today.
I don't know whether we
Okay,
You've got it.
that's all right then.
any.
So we wait to see.
I've got a number for a couple of builders who I thought we could approach.
Please.
Oh, good.
One actually I happened to bump into in David Hall's open garden and
Not in your
asked him,
car.
and asked him about quoting. He's quite happy to quote, but we wouldn't get the work done till at least next year.
That's
But
standard.
if he wants us to
One of the
quote,
others,
he's
yeah.
happy to quote.
Well, it's been waiting some years. So
I don't think Miss Appletree would be too upset.
I think if you can pass that detail on
Yeah.
to Yvonne, that would be helpful.
And the other person I thought we could contact was, you had some work done by somebody, didn't you?
Lee.
Yeah,
Yeah, Lee.
I haven't got his number.
You can pass that on to
Yeah, he always seems to be got a good, well, like lots of builders, has a good pipeline.
Well, yes,
So I think, but at
he's
this
doing a
rate, we're
lot of
halfway
work
through
in the
this year
village.
anyhow, and the fact that if we get it up by December 2024, I think that's a result. Meanwhile, it might fall down, of course, but that's a different
Okay.
issue.
All right, thank you for that. So if you pass them on.
Yeah.
The Swan Inn, the ACD went in.
Yes.
How long ago?
Days ago.
Oh, days
Yes,
ago.
we only agreed. Got the last bit through last time.
For the ACD. What was that?
Well, whatever it was, that was waiting. But yes, it's got its
How does that impact on the current news?
Well, it doesn't particularly until they grant it, and even if they do grant it, as we hope they will, then it doesn't necessarily matter a lot. It can be useful. It's had one before, of course, anyway. It's really hard to tell how that will go. I hear that it may not be quite as open and shut anyway. It's sort of yet another further warning of what he might do in the future.
Okay.
But we don't really know.
So it's rumour rather than fact.
No, it's more than rumour. He's definitely saying it. He said it to me in the past. Oh, I'm going to, if, you know.
But then,
It's
He
just,
said it to us
it's
that
just
day when
another
we went
step.
round to
What?
tell him.
What?
Joe, when you and I went round to see
Yeah,
him.
no, we had an hour of it.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure he is.
very good.
Yeah, we had a lot of it. It's been going on for months, but this is sort of another step forward or backward, if you like. The next thing then is the CCLA. Now, one step forward there, Yvonne has got the forms which you're all busy filling in tonight, or you will do while you're here.
I got that.
It will come to you because you were late, but they're here somewhere.
Yes, they're in the middle there.
Okay, so we'll do that. But the other thing is that we had to have the minutes approved from last month where we authorised it. I've signed the minutes this month, so they have to go off.
Good.
So that will now fall into place, providing no one goes home before they fill the form in. Land south of Bud's Lane, that's the piggery. I went there just before I went on holiday and took a load of pictures. Before that, actually I'd spoken to the head of planning enforcement at Ashford, and after an exchange of emails I sent her the photographs that I took when I got back from holiday. I've also copied them to concerned residents, and they've been copied on to the PA at Bud's house, Charlie's PA, who had earlier been copied in on the emails that I was having. The immediate reaction from Ashford of enforcing was not at all positive. They felt that their original visit hadn't come up with anything. I think it's pretty bad. I've got photographs on the iPad if anyone wants to look at them before they go. It is a complete tip. The pigs are not in good shape. I'm not a farmer, but in good shape in the conditions they're in. The residents have talked to the RSPCA about their accommodation and what accommodation they should have. Well, what accommodation they have got is a joke, as in barely any. It's just a mess. Apparently KCC have been involved as well by the residents and have visited and looked at it.
And DEFRA, I think.
DEFRA was supposed to have come a while ago but didn't seem to have done anything much. Gave advice. So I think it's just a matter of press on and try and get one of these things, whether it's the waste or the animal husbandry or the planning and the enforcement conditions of the Article 4 direction or whatever it is. It's not good, and unfortunately if it is clamped down on, there's then a massive amount of work and money to clear it up again.
Yeah. Do we know the name and the identity? I'm not asking you to
They
reveal
do,
it.
they do, I think. The residents.
Do we? We don't know the identity of the man.
No, he's
the
someone
woman
who
responsible.
lives somewhere quite a distance from here. I can't remember where, I was told.
Right. Does anybody
and
know?
he comes,
Not that I
he
want
comes
any
each
names,
morning.
but does anybody know who it is? No.
He comes each morning and looks after,
Right, okay.
feeds them or does whatever.
Okay.
There's no water on site. That's the thing, not if he does anything at all.
That means to me that it won't last long.
Well, there are two
Well,
water
there is a
meters
stand
there.
pipe very close
He's
by.
trying to get a pipe in there maybe, but it wouldn't be his water.
Charles Water.
You know, yeah, it's
It's
a
all-
house of cards, I think.
It's all a state, indeed. It's a pity really, for all and sundry, but it shouldn't have happened. Okay, so that's that. Now the planning applications, we get on then to land adjacent to Poplar Farmhouse. Who would like to?
I don't very often make a speech, but I feel a small...
Go on.
Oh, go on. I feel a small speech coming on. I didn't say anything first time round, and I've listened with interest to everything I've heard here. And I take into account, I mean, I might have asked questions about the sewage and the flooding and everything else. One or two of the comments have alluded to things like social housing and housing for young people and people who lived in Wittersham and so on, which I think is laudable, really. The trouble is, it's used so often, depending on the circumstance, one way or another, which reduces the impact of the argument. And I'm only saying this because, just for example, my son, who is in his 40s and was born and brought up in Wittersham, and he was fortunate enough to own a plot of land at the edge of the village, and he put in an application, and it produced opposition from every quarter. It produced opposition from that end of the village, from the middle of the village, from every possible objection came in from people who are here and have and people who aren't here. And anyway, eventually he threw in the towel and he sold it, and it's been done. And if you ever drive past my house, there is now the most beautiful house, just completed last week. I mean, it's a masterpiece of creativity and design. It's absolutely stunning, and it's got wonderful view. And the old farm buildings that were there, you know, are now gone, and it's done beautifully. But it just concerns me that it's just, if it's convenient to object on the grounds of we're not allowing young people to live in the village who have been and brought up here, but the next time we think, well, I don't like that, so I'm going to turn it the other way around. It reduces the impact of the argument. We ought to learn from this and not just throw it into the agenda every time so that we can write a massive long letter objecting to every possible proposal. But anyway, there you are. I mean, I've made my speech, and I think the village has something to learn. Really, I do.
All right,
thank you. Sorry. That's it. That's my speech.
No applause, I'm afraid.
No, that's my speech.
Sally.
I've made it. And those who have or are guilty of this division or this double standard will know exactly who they are.
We all know who they are.
Well, we do, and there are some who are here this evening, and I'm not looking at anybody in the eye, but I could do, and they know exactly who they are.
Right, Sally.
I still feel the access is a problem. I don't drive many places in the week, but tonight I drove here and 2 cars walking out the pavement outside Poplar Fields in order for another car to come past.
And that's not the busy time, that's when the village is getting quiet.
Yeah, but at night
Also,
there's a long stretch of cars there. There's
Indeed.
not even a little
And
sort
on
of
the
pull
bend.
into people.
Indeed, I know.
I understand about the sewage, that it's not done, but I still think something could be arranged or done to allay people's fears on that side. That's all I'm saying there.
Sue?
Yeah, I'm quite... There's a vast problem with that storage there. I think the plot is far too small for 4 houses, and the access is appalling. Like Sally, I came through there tonight and I had to drive on the pavement because there was a car. Yes, I had no choice. There was a car the other way who just sat there and thought, I'm not going
The
anywhere.
irony is, of course, you're not allowed to ride a little electric scooter on the pavement, but,
Yeah.
but no one's stopping you driving a car on the pavement.
No.
There's no alternative.
But I had the right of way, but I had no choice.
Indeed, because someone will
So,
start coming the other way.
Yeah, so I'm not at all happy with that.
No. Colin?
I would be far happier if there were more questions answered at this point in time. They're asking me on behalf of the people in Wittersham to agree to something that I think is still an unknown, and so I would have to Probably. Make no comment at this stage.
Leslie?
I totally agree with the ladies opposite, especially about the access. And not only the surge and the water runoff, but frankly the water availability in this village, water pressure is harmless. And, you know, I've been cut off a few, not like my sister in near Ireland, who was cut off for days, but I mean there have been times, even so far this summer, where on the weekends I'm getting a dribble of water. So all these water issues, I think we need to resolve or have much better answers from any developer coming in, which isn't, I'm sorry to say, post-planning, because most often when it is post-planning, it's nothing happens about it.
Or it's too late to do anything about it.
It's too late. And as far as what I said about affordable housing, I'm sorry, Alan, about your son. I think it's disgusting. But the only thing
I wasn't gazing at your quarter of the room.
No, but no, I agree. And the thing is that there is one proposal, one development being proposed for this village, which we all know what it is, which did have some room for affordable housing. 12 affordable houses. And again, you know, for every reason possible, that was objected to. So I'm certainly not going to support.
It's still in abeyance, but it's a bit limping.
I think, you know, we need to find the answers to our housing problem in this village in another way to just accepting 4 more 3-bedroom houses, which, as you rightly say, particularly in the current market, I'm not sure who's going to live in, certainly not local people. And that's what we should be thinking about.
Paul, thank you.
I think this is a really difficult issue, and I haven't really heard anything I disagree with, and I think we're stuck in a bit of a dilemma. What I try and do when I'm looking at something like this is to consider what I consider 2 different views, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. One is what I call the planning view, and the other one is the social environmental view. The amount of land that's available for this development is highly subjective, whether it's enough land or not enough land. I mean, you only have to go into Robinson Lane and see those 3 houses are built on the way out there. If you translated that into Mr. Williams's land, you could probably get 5 there in that. So it's a moot point as to how much land these days. Market forces will drive whether you sell a 3-bedroom, a 5-bedroom, or a 4-bedroom. There are a lot of people who said that the developers intended and would never sell, they would never get off the ground. I don't know if any of you have ever driven through it recently, it's all full. Some of those are starting to be sold anyhow, but that's just well, whatever, they were sold, they were bought. They were bought. Well, we have a problem with rental property. I don't know how much there is in this village, but there isn't, I don't think it's very much anyhow. It's an issue that we have to face. We are woefully short of houses in this country. The average house price in Wittersham, sale price, in the year that ended 2 months ago was £538,000. And the fact of life is that most young people don't historically, not based on a historical view, they're not being able to afford it. And you know, there are different ways of doing it: shared ownership, co-ownership, parents, all sorts of things. But the fact of life is that whether we like it or not in Wittersham, we are not going to stop house building. I completely agree with Leslie in terms of affordable housing. Both of us, I know all of us, are very passionate about that. And I think it's an absolute tragedy that the same enthusiasm for stopping certain developments is not applied to actually where we do have an opportunity. And it will come. You know, no one is ever going to stop that ultimately. If you look at maps of this village around the First World War, half the people in this room wouldn't have anywhere to live. They weren't built. They simply weren't built. We do need more housing. When I look at it from a planning point of view, I'm pretty open-minded, whether it's 4 3-bedrooms or 3 4-bedrooms. I mean, no one builds houses if they think they won't sell. It's commercial madness. It's commercial. No, but what I'm saying is that in my view, what is actually built there, if it conforms to the correct planning regulations and building regulations, I can understand that. My concern is twofold, and it has been said before, but I am going to say it again. One is the whole access point. right? Whether you have 4 houses or 400 houses there, it is still an issue. And it's not in isolation. We've talked about trying to get a pedestrian crossing, right, in front of Dax's shop or whatever. It's pretty close to what we're talking about here. And in isolation, we kind of focus on this one entrance, and it is important, but we have to see it in the dig around. And the sewage thing is a real problem. And by the way, I personally, this is my own belief, 4 houses is not going to make a massive difference. It's not going to improve or to the detriment. And actually, if it's done really, really well, and different ways of using a treatment plant or what have you can be coped. And I don't think we're suddenly going to be requiring to build Noah's Ark. I am very concerned about the difference in height and the threat to corner cottage and white cottage. It's something we need, to people who live outside the village, and I'm not addressing this to you, but people outside, think, well, hang on a minute, they've survived this long, but it actually matters because it's not just those 2 properties, it's the bit that goes on. So, putting it all together, from a planning point of view, I can understand why I'm struggling to find a way to object to it. From a site and environmental and the impact on the neighbourhood there, I have serious misgivings. It will take long time to build houses and there'll be disruption on the road. And I do take your point about the roads very seriously. It's really important. But it's kind of, we have to kind of live there. If anyone's been through Ham Street in the last year and a half, you'll see the impact. You can't build houses without big lights. The state of the place outside the Churchill residential Tesco entrance there, it was that's a nightmare. You take your life in your hands sometimes, and then someone puts a bit of tarmac. But the fact is that will happen. Pulling all together, I think the 2 most important issues are the sewage and the access. That's my view. Thanks. Sorry, Alan, I wasn't trying to compete with a
My view is that I've always been supportive, as the council has always been supportive, but not always unanimous, of the 30 houses at the other end of the village, and we still are, but it keeps getting sunk. So I'm not against having houses in the village. I really do think this is the wrong place, simply because the access is not poor, not deficient, it's dire. It is really, really crazy. And if you read, I'm afraid, Tara, the KCC view in their latest letter, I mean, when they're saying, okay, you've got to have a fire engine that can go up and come out forwards, you're struggling on doing that. How are you going to deal with the refuse? You've got your bin store the other end of the lane. Is everyone going to wheel the wheelie bins down? Or are you going to expect the refuse vehicle to go up and come out forwards? These are problems, let alone, this is just getting up and down the lane, let alone the fact that when they do come out of the lane, I am not convinced that you can build displays however much you want to. Mrs. Buxton, as far as I know, owns one corner, and I don't think she's going to let you have it. There's a bit of shaking of head going on behind you. And the other one obviously is in the hands of the Williams family, and that's not for me to judge. Although I would be reluctant to see them all go, but that's a slightly different thing. The cars across the road are important, and Kent County Council, in their previous very deficient piece of work for the 23 houses, did say and acknowledge that those cars would be able to stay. They were not going to yellow line it, which is just as well because there's nowhere else for them to go. They said that they could stay, and rather bizarrely they said that the lorries could get in and out according to their displays because there were some inches spare. Although it wasn't clear that they allowed for the mirrors and the gap with the curb. In other words, it was bonkers. Now that was then. They haven't got into that particular point. They've said they want to see splays, not splays, lorry swept diagrams, I used to employ a large number of bin men. I had about 900 staff. They weren't all bin men, but a lot of them were, all over the country, and I would give no one any quarter on their skill at driving through very narrow spaces and getting round very tight corners. But doing it once, doing it 10 times, okay. Doing it every week or every fortnight for 20 years and not ever hitting anything is different. And it just does not make, I'm sorry, it doesn't make any sense. I will say, by the way, before I finish, because I've gone on as long as Paul and Alan, that I pay credit to Tara for being a more user-friendly architect than some we've had here. So thank you for that. But I'm afraid when we come to vote, I would vote against it.
But you may not get a vote. You may not get a vote.
I do have a vote.
I thought we were only if we're split 3-3.
No, I have 2 votes if necessary.
Right, okay.
I have a vote if I cast it. A first vote, and I have a casting vote. That's all in the law. That's not me.
That's I just forgot that.
That's not me saying that. But we have had the casting vote situation occasionally, you're right. So can I ask, who is in favour of supporting the...
Sorry to interrupt, can I ask a question here? I'm unclear. Can we, and this is not fun, I don't believe this is fudging the issue, can one send this back on the grounds that we don't think it's a wise application to submit because of the conditions? Because if we go through it, we either vote to support or object, and then possibly, I don't want to prejudge what councillors might say, but we'll put a load of conditions on it. Can we not just sort of, in this first instance, say in our opinion, we feel that this needs further work on?
Well, that's objecting, really.
Is it? Okay, fair enough.
So
I just was trying to find a way of...
Who is going to vote in support of the application? I won't come back to you, I'm afraid, Tara. You're voting in support, Alan? And nobody else? Okay. Who is voting to... Sorry?
Looks Paul's still thinking.
Oh,
Paul's still thinking that. I'm not going to vote in favour.
You're not? No. Okay, so we've got one in favour, Alan. Thank you for that. And who's voting to object? And Paul is abstaining. Okay, that's fine. So it is a conclusion to object, I'm afraid, and we will put in a narrative which you'll see on the portal in due course when we've written it. I would say that, as you probably know better than we do as an architect, they don't necessarily take much notice of us. Let me just adjourn so that you can make a comment. It's only polite.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And I obviously respect your decision and your opinions, which I've listened to. Out of curiosity, is there anything we could do with the drive that would satisfy people in the room?
We won't go all around again, but for me, the access is irremediable. Because if you go and look at it closely with the parking there, you just cannot take, short of taking 2 front gardens away and delivering the people somewhere further along, you know, you just cannot get out, and you've got a 90-degree turn to do. You just can't do it.
The wall on Mr. Williams' side is relatively new, I gather. So it's not an old antique wall.
It is a new wall. It's only been there 30 years.
But you can't drive along the path all the way, you know. It's the distance between. You've got to get past the curb, ultimately.
Yeah, I've driven up and down quite a few times.
There's no great distance there for a lorry. So, okay, we've come to that conclusion. So, no, I don't think there's anything you can do. I think that access is simply irremediable.
Well, sorry, with respect, that's the sticking point, probably. It's
2
the answer to your question.
2 people going
if you can find a way of addressing that, but I can't make any suggestions on that. But to me, the sewage situation is really important. But there's ways of handling that. There's ways of dealing with that. But the access, you know, what's physically there right now, and also it's worth remembering that the bin men service we get in this village, I think, is pretty good. But these guys work really quickly. They do not mess around. Imagine an hour to go up there in the same speed, right, and at the same time as kids are being walked to school. You know, that is a major catastrophe about to happen. And what we don't want to do, you know, we can live in a world of saying what if and, you know, risk averse all the time. But that's important. So to answer your question, I think that's the sticking point.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for your
one more point about the access.
Yes, indeed.
I'm a professional road driver. I've been doing it all my life.
Yeah.
The guys there on about bin men, they do it every day. It's a regular set route. They know the tight points. They know when to turn and all the rest of it. They're really good at it. They can do it in their sleep. The people delivering materials to your site probably never been there before and never want to go there ever again. They're not going to be so careful or skillful or whatever, despite their best efforts. They're going to have accident after accident.
Good point. Good point. Well made. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's come. You don't have to stay, but you're welcome to if you want to. Now, let me carry on with the meeting then. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Right. Can I just ask though, please, that you, can I just ask you please be quiet? And councillors? Okay, let's carry on. We're now on to Furness Farmhouse.
What's it called?
Furness Farmhouse. Right, have people seen that there was an objection?
Yes.
from
Yes,
the-
yes.
And there's a response from... Okay, what are people's views? Do you want to start again, Alan?
I'm relaxed about it and I voted in favour.
Sue?
I can't see what that objection.
Okay.
I don't think those
we'll vote
windows
at the
are
end
going to look
anyway.
like,
No
you know.
problems. Colin?
No, I think in overall, I would support.
You need to go outside.
I'm sorry. Question about it. I'm certain as what it's been doing with staying or not. What
No,
happens
you're
next?
very welcome to stay, but you have
What
to
do
be
you do
quiet.
next? Could you tell us?
Well, we're just going through the agenda.
The agenda?
We're going through the council meeting agenda.
The next meeting?
This meeting.
This
It's
meeting.
the ongoing.
The one we're doing.
This one, Mr. Williams.
There will be a report, David, for
Right.
you to read. There will be a report, but it won't be prepared yet because we're having the meeting.
Right, okay.
I mean, it was good, but
Right. Yeah.
Okay, let's carry on, please.
Sorry?
Do you need a lift
No,
home?
thank you very much. No, we're okay. It's not too
Let's
far.
carry on. So, Furness, Colin?
Thank you.
I said I would support.
Okay.
Yes, I would have
no,
to
I agree with Alan. Everybody
So,
else, yeah.
to be clear then,
No problem.
are we all...
Yes.
Yes.
I will. So are we all supportive
Yes.
of that?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have anything to say about it in the response?
No.
Just that we're okay. Fine, good. The land adjacent to 1617 Lloyd's Green, this is just gone to appeal, and as far as I know, we've put in enough already. And it's helped by the fact that Ashford have now refused it. We haven't seen why, but that's a start. And I mean, it's another bonkers
Yes,
case. but I'm
yes,
just
I
saying.
agree. But I mean, you know, it will eventually come out.
Indeed. Okay. So that's we're now on to risk management policy. Last month you all saw the new risk management policy, but then it didn't get onto the agenda, so we weren't able to endorse it. Are people happy with it to endorse it tonight?
Yep.
It's on
Yes.
the
Yes,
agenda.
I'm ready.
So,
So,
Can I have a proposer, please?
yeah, I'm quite happy
Colin,
to
and a
propose it.
seconder.
I'll second.
Leslie, everybody?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's endorsed, fully. Even Alan. Good. Thank you. Right, Invicta Law closing its property team. I think you heard that before, but anyway,
Yeah.
they've decided, having woken up a month ago and asked us if they could get on with it, they've now decided to pack it. So the key there is we've agreed in the past to register our land holdings. It proceeded very slowly with Invicta. We now need to pick it up with a new team.
Yes.
What we were going to do until Invicta suddenly popped up again for a brief few weeks was I'd approached Surrey Hills solicitors. The reason for them, they're over in Dorking, but the reason for them is because their partner used to be the legal advisor to Cal.
Yeah.
Now he's retired since then, but I believe they've got other, and he was the legal advisor, I think either to Surrey or Sussex or both as well. I think that they've already had a good clutch of council clients, but I need to just inquire about that. And if that looks good with the woman who's taken over from him, used to work with him, then we will just carry on trying to get this stuff done, because it's been going on for years, like all legal things do. Okay, everyone's happy with that. We now come to Mr. Williams' case for the Judith Mary Training Fund, not charity.
Should we have reminded David to stay?
Well, never mind.
Well,
He was a bit confused by that point.
He was.
Okay. My feeling is, firstly, we can't readily commit a councillor to be willing to carry out the role, although the fact is that in principle we have one for the village hall once we sort out the insurance case, which is sort of half sorted out. I'm just not sure whether that's the whole answer, and it's a bit difficult to know how to do it. They've said that at least it is in the name of the trustees. There's no point asking our insurers because it's someone else's policy. I think probably we have to go with a letter to Cayman Company, and they'll probably come back and say we're not telling you. Anyhow, we will do what we can on that, but it's hard to say we can definitely provide a trustee. We can definitely hope to provide a trustee. I mean, it's something that I think we should be probably quite keen to see. It's a nice idea. I mean, it's not actually, as Alan pointed out before, it's not actually a huge amount of money that's going in. It's a useful amount of money for giving small grants to people to whom a small grant makes a lot of difference, and we shouldn't, just because we are not in that boat, we shouldn't forget the fact that there are people to whom £100 really makes a big difference. If the council is willing to consider it, and you'll tell me in a minute, I think we need to check with CALP that there's no reason somewhere why we're really not supposed to do it. I don't know that there is, but I just would like to be sure. And as I said before, is there a clash between the status of planning application and this decision? Well, the fact is that we have decided to object to the application anyway, so that's clean enough. The only question is whether by doing that, if it doesn't happen, whether the charity will happen, sorry, the fund will happen. He hasn't made them contingent, they may be. So what do people think about, in principle, saying that if we're not warned off it, that we could do it? What do people think?
I think we should definitely try and do it.
Yes, I would agree that in fact I think we should get a
word.
clarification.
Indeed, okay.
Then we should try and then think of a word that makes us sound enthusiastic.
No, I'm not unenthusiastic, I'm just being cautious.
I understand.
Do other people think the same? You're the expert on charities, by the way.
Okay, so I would say that the aims are entirely laudable.
Right.
You know, that this could make a real difference to certain individuals. When he started talking about providing, if someone's going to go into painting, decorating or workman's tools, I know of people who have changed careers, that have gone into nursing, for example, and you know, finding those extra funds in a family can be really difficult. And I applaud him and his family for doing that. I see absolutely no problem with the aims. My concern with trustees are that having been involved as a trustee and also recruiting trustees and also guiding charities on how to recruit trustees, we just need to be a little bit careful on this. So for example, we are only allowed to have 7 parish councillors. You know, we are restricted in terms of our numbers, so we just need to be a little, I don't know how many parish councillors Stone are allowed to have. Is it 4? 5. Okay, so we just have to be a little bit careful, and if I'm not worried about setting a precedent that if another 10 charities say, come on, we need one as well. We just need to be a little bit careful. One of the ways around that is part E, or point E here. It says a member of the Williams family or someone nominated by the family.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that maybe something to consider is not just saying it has to be a Wittersham Parish councillor, or maybe someone nominated by the parish council. And the reason I say that is that most charity boards have a minimum number of trustees. If they don't have, say, 3, they're not quorate. And if they can't fill a couple here, does the charity then have to basically go bust? So it's about their risk management.
It is very difficult, and I imagine it's the same in all villages, but I suspect Wittersham is probably not an exception. It is very difficult to find people who are prepared to fill a role in a charity. And
it is.
I mean, every time I think we've got a full committee for the Jeremiah Greenland, somebody goes and resigns, and you get a cascade for the door.
The good thing about
this
is
that your point about the clergy as well, because now we've got this situation where
they don't want that.
No, but that doesn't mean to say everything stops. And so I applaud his direction, his aims. I think the principle behind getting people from responsible organisations that have connections with the village, that have the village interests at heart. And also, one of the things we all know as parish councillors is outside of these meetings, we get a lot of comments and approaches and suggestions. There are a lot of people in the village who come to us and give their ideas and who would never be seen dead in a public context because they don't want to stick their head about the parapet, but they've still got a right to be heard. And it might be difficult for somebody, you know, to say, look, I need some bit of help to, you know, the van was broken into and the insurance wasn't covered and, you know, I just need a bit of help. And if we've got people who are connected with the village who understand, there's a way of managing that so that people aren't discomforted. But I think what they need to do is to look at how they're constituting their volunteer board. They need to make sure that it is village related, but they mustn't be sort of constricted so that if suddenly they can't find anybody, they're completely stuck. Excuse me. The other thing that just struck me is that if this goes the way it's hopefully will go, I think he's underestimated the amount of money they can raise. There are an awful lot of grants out there at the moment for small charities. It is, I mean, it's not easy to get them, and you have to put the hard yards in to apply and what have you, but the principles of looking after people who need in rural communities, etc., and we know that, the need is there and there is the money there. Mm-hmm. So I think that if he gets this right, if the family gets this right, this could be something of real value. I just think they need to rethink the board, the trustee board. A bit more flexibility. So I would support the principle.
We're supportive of it. I would need to check with ACRK and sorry, with CAP. It is a CED. It is a CIO. Well, that's his proposal. It's a CIO, so it is a limited liability organisation. He says limited or no. I mean limited as in it's either nothing or £1 probably. But he also said, of course, his solicitor hadn't looked at it yet.
Jeremy, is it disingenuous to ask if there is someone prepared to do that within the parish council?
No, I don't mind. I mean, if
to do what?
To actually
to be a trustee.
Be the person on what they suggest would be a 3-year term.
David Williams has asked if I would do it, and I said I would.
Oh, fine.
Oh, okay. Perfect then. Alan's already got the experience of the Jerry Greenman.
But I already have too many responsibilities. But, you know, no,
well, he was talking about one meeting a year or something, wasn't he?
Yes.
Although I don't know then who actually is the dispersing person, because you don't wait a year to get your £100.
Yes.
Maybe the trust sets up a policy.
I suspect that's the chair,
and delegates
given the way it's set up.
Yeah.
He was talking about a small remuneration for the chair, and I think whoever was the chair would probably have to be the admin coordinator as well.
Sure.
But I probably prefer that wasn't limited, that I said that. But you have to, I suppose, don't you?
It's on the tape.
He's not going to read, he's not going to listen to this. He'll just keep quiet.
Okay. Right, let's carry on.
Unless he buys the box set.
Right, Chairman. Okay, nice to see you, Mick.
Good night, Mick. Take care. Safe journey, Mick.
I hope you found it in, well, I don't know what you liked.
I was interested to see how it progressed since the elections, you see. There was one item on here, and I'm not saying which one it was, that I was interested, and obviously I've got a reason to be interested. But, you know,
and you
I'll see you again, don't worry.
You found things haven't improved. Good night. So, payments for authorisation, well...
He's not still in post.
No. He came. He said he will come occasionally.
He's just a constituent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's enthusiasm for you, isn't
Indeed.
it? Such a good example.
All right, come on. We're doing payments for authorisation.
He'll be nominated by the Williams family.
We're doing payments for authorisation, although we want to do these under delegation. She's
expenses.
No, you can't do that one. That's excluded. But the 4-drawer metal filing cabinet, which I encouraged Yvonne to get, because
It's in there.
It's in the
cupboard.
It means that she can get rid of a lot of the clag that's clogging up her spare bedroom and put it here.
You see?
Because there's loads of stuff that's not fit to go to the archive. She doesn't want to lose it up to Maidstone, but she can't keep it all at home in a small space. So
well, I would call that a win.
I reckon it's great.
I think you're absolutely right. We're voting. Please give me the
and being serious for a minute, it's because the village hall people decided to have a clear out, and I spoke to Paul who's now the chairman here, and he's done a load of clearing out to make
So
space.
is it a big cupboard? Is that a secure environment?
It used to be the post
Well,
office.
it's a lockable
Lockable
cabinet.
cabinet.
Would you like to go and inspect it?
Well, I was just thinking, because we've got this dilemma about what to do with the History Society.
No, it's not that.
And I thought if one's buying a big filing cabinet, and it was secure in there, look at there, we could take up most of Yvonne's filing cabinet.
It's like,
See what I mean?
it's like a TARDIS in there.
No, I'm not getting involved in that one.
You're involved on the PCC.
I was thinking
They're
that
all right, but they are.
they
There
might
might
be
be room for
the
another
Historical
small.
Society.
It's a lovely
Alan,
cabinet.
there might be room for another
Well, it used to
cabinet.
be absolute
Did you never
stuff
come
full
to the
of
post office?
It's a lovely cupboard, and I didn't know it was there, and I'm going to make great use of it, I'm sure.
Right, okay, so we're approving, come on, we're just
Yeah.
wasting time.
Yeah,
We're approving that cabinet.
Yes.
And now we've also got the clerk's expenses that she's put in,
Yes.
which we have to approve. I mean, she can't do it herself. Everything there is straightforward.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So we then get on to the caretaker report. Is there anything to think about?
Well, with the caretaker, it comes up under the finance, but I've had to replace the van key because it was in 2 bits. So you could turn the key with the but then you needed to put the other bit in to undo them, immobilise a bit. But he kept losing the key. Only, a little bit. Twice he lost it. Once it was on the grass in the hedging, by the hedge in Canardington. Spent quite a bit of my time finding it, but he found it. But it's quite expensive to replace. So that's it's in a fortnight too, but he hasn't got it yet. So still taking care of the and he's done, obviously the grass stopped growing a bit, so he's now hitting the hedges, as you've probably seen Memorial Garden. He's been working.
Good. Finance, the monthly transaction statements. As usual, there's the one for caretaker only and there's the one for everything.
Yeah.
Marked as such, Paul.
Can I sign them?
Just
I
one
did notice
query.
that. I did.
Sorry?
Just one query.
Yeah.
Go on.
On the monthly Lloyds Bank Unity Trust one, there's a pension payment of 112.23, but then
Is
on
it
the caretaker scheme, the work pension payment's 121.05. Are they different things or?
No, it should be the same. It's just that the one, the finance, our monthly one is the one that's reconciled, and the other one is me trying to make sure that we can see what we've got left in the one, so it should be the same amount, Sally.
Right.
So it's an error.
Yes. So if you can cross that through, Jerry, after you one, or not even sign it.
But actually, you see here, the caretaker one, 121, I tell you what you may have done is sent out the wrong month, have you?
Yeah, there could be, because I had a lot of trouble with it, trying to change it.
But they both say 36.
Yes. In fact, can we scrub that completely
Well
and have a look,
spotted,
because
it looks as though it's the right one, but I
there's
don't
something, when I came to do it again, there was something not right.
As you say, it's the main one that's reconciled to the bank.
The main one is right, because that's reconciled.
And this one you actually just pick out and put on a new spreadsheet.
But it was because I had to change it so that I could save it as something different. That's when the problems came in, and I got two, and I'm thinking which one's right, which
All
one's
right,
wrong.
so I won't touch
So,
the
no,
caretaker one.
no,
Do you want
no,
me
I
to
agree.
sign this one then?
That's the one that's reconciled.
Which is actually our proper account.
Yes.
The other one is a
Yes, it's
memorandum
the other one.
account.
Yes, we're trying to see how much we've actually got in the caretaker account.
Oh, okay.
And because
Signed-
the new
I've
system, I
signed the one.
can't prove it like I used to.
Okay, well spotted, Sally. Shows someone's paying attention.
Yeah, that's pretty
Impressive.
missed. Everybody else would have missed it.
She's keen.
Yeah, well, that's good, yeah.
Okay, the first quarter budget statement. comes in small print, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And Yvonne and I have spoken about this before, but not to any conclusion. The weakness of this is that the budget is not calendarised. So everything's being compared to the whole year, even though it's only the first quarter, and then you say there's such and such a variance, which obviously is not particularly helpful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, it just doesn't really tell you what a better presentation would do. But that relies on Yvonne finding out in the system, because this is all a proper system, how she can calendarise the budget. Has anyone got any problems with it? No?
No.
Do I have to sign that one?
Yes, please.
Yes, please, it should be next.
I did have one question actually, not a
Go on.
problem with it. I just couldn't really remember why the caretaker scheme didn't come as a budget item.
Because we don't, because if we put it in the made our budget's 35,000.
Right.
Well, the budget for the caretaker is 34.
Yeah.
So if we put that in, we'd be 60, 70.
Yes.
But that's what we ask Ashford for, and we don't get that money from Ashford as a precept. So I have to compete.
But we do get that money from somewhere.
Yes, we get it.
Yes. So
that's why we
do it.
That's why.
Yes, I understand. But if we're going to, I find it difficult to understand why we've got a budget variance of almost the total amount of actual. That's what I'm saying. And I'm thinking, well, even if the money comes from different places, if it's the budget for the caretaker scheme, shouldn't we recognise that?
What's happened, Paul, or this is...
Or do we take the fact that we're only actually taking one slice?
This is an explanation of how it's happened as much as how it could be.
Okay.
What we did when it started off, and Yvonne still did all accounting by hand in a book, was that she accounted fully for the precept and then kept a memorandum account effectively for the caretaker, where we put our 4,000 in and the caretaker had its own sort of balance, but it wasn't part of our precept, so it was taken as a kind of lower priority, if you like. Now once it all went on to the computerised accounts, they're all in there together.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I understand that. It works in a slightly
I understand
different
that. I'm working with one organisation at the moment where they're looking to acquire a building and then develop that or what have you, and they've taken that as a separate thing, and it just completely skews the budget. But that's down the question. So it's not. I understand it. Thank you.
The thing is that the precept is the key starting point, which we then spend and we keep a running balance. The caretaker is a kind of different parcel over here.
Thank you.
Right. So, planning, we can note the fact that an amended description has been made for the street, which is of no great interest to us, I think. We haven't had any decisions.
Yes, we have.
Oh, we have now. Right.
Yes, because this came in
after the agenda.
Yes. Well, no, I picked it up after the agenda because I'm not getting notified on these things if I don't keep checking daily, and I miss the fact. And I think because 41 the street got the amended description, I didn't check on the other one, but the other one, which was for the internal alterations, has been granted.
That's internal at the same house?
Yes, which is where you go, where we had a bit of a problem and we made more comments on that one. But I did note that it has made a condition. They put new windows in it, double glazed, and you can't put double glazed windows in a listed building, so they've got to change the windows. So that's something that they have had to do.
You will not be surprised that we had a proper Ashford when the chief executive was there. That's ridiculous. They've got to get a grip of this ability of saying, oh well, if it's listed, you've just got to put up with the drafts and the energy going out the window. They've got to change that, and it's commented on nationally as well. It's just ridiculous.
My builder says it's nonsense anyway, and he has just done it.
Maybe. You're the
It's nonsense.
Yeah, it is silly. They've got to change it. But the trouble is, they are in a position, I mean, there are occasions when the listings officer says, oh, it's got to stay in 1960s because that's when it got listed. Rather than, well, actually it was listed for its 1830s or its 1740s, but that's not there anymore. Okay.
And I have also put the Cullens cottage one I have under delegation.
Okay,
I've
right, yeah,
supported.
individual people, yeah.
So I put that in as well.
Okay. Open spaces. Anything?
Not from me.
No.
Anyone else? Highways, we've talked about the HIP.
And I've got something through today on drainage, and this is one where Sally mentioned the problem around Moons Green.
Oh, bottom of Hans Hill.
Yes, I reported that one. And I've just got a response today, came through. Thank you for your inquiry dated 25th of April. We have risk assessed this location and reported issues to the local water board. We have adopted a new risk-based proactive approach to maintaining over 250,000 highway drains across the county, and we now aim to cleanse all highway drains on a county-wide programme up to every 3 years. Our approach considers many factors attaining to various risks across the highway network, such as road hierarchy, speed limit, or whether it is a known flood zone. These factors combined will produce individual risk weightings for every asset, which in turn will influence the frequency in which drains are cleaned, these frequencies being annual, biannual or triannual. Moons Green will be attended as part of the county-wide programme detailed above and doesn't meet our service level agreement for additional cleansing at this time.
So it would be done in 3 years.
So I am actually going to go back to her and mention the one at the Swan Bend.
Yeah, indeed.
Because, you know, I reported it and then nothing happened. And when I checked the number, it came up with, been dealt with. So I went back and said, no, it hasn't, sent another photo. The last I saw it was waiting attention. But that's wrecking their new pavement. It's just
it's ridiculous.
bananas, and it's solid. You know, you've got that much gap before it's solid underneath.
Sure.
So I'm going
they don't do
ask
it,
her
guys.
to say what you think about.
Okay.
As it's on highways, and you mentioned the Swan Bend, I noticed that the patching is carefully sinking lower and lower and lower.
It's all going. It's all going, the patching.
It's all going.
They haven't lasted more than 3 months or 6 months. Right, POWs?
Well, we have, as you know, they're brambles, where they have done their, supposed to do it twice, I think, cut the grass, vegetation and the side. The one along down beside the gill, the brambles just grew over again, and we just go along with our secateurs. That's the only thing you can do these days, take secateurs with
Right.
out.
Cemetery, churchyard?
Just to say on public rights of way as well, that today either the landowner or the farmer who owns where they put in for the planning permission for 7 houses,
Yeah.
and there was an unofficial footpath,
Yeah, sure.
everybody have put up an 8-foot blockage to stop people from walking there.
No, interesting.
That's Moors.
Well, it's either Mr. Moore or Mr. Axe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you say it's not a.
So they've stopped people using that.
Yeah.
And are
It's
they
like,
going-
you know, the metal railings that go around like a little substation.
Oh yeah.
It's one of them put in with 3 fence posts.
Right, so done fairly solidly.
Yeah.
They're not going to just be able to knock it over.
Well, I think I
They'll have a
could
go.
probably knock it over. I did do that and it did move a bit.
It won't last then because
No,
there's a
it
whole
won't.
pile of people go through
It's
there.
already on next door.
But the alternative is they're going to come down the windows and run the risk of jamming to get
Yeah.
Right. I go in the other direction.
Cemetery or churchyard?
I don't know whether Alan agree with me. The big tree in the front of the church, I think some of those branches that are coming down towards the church.
As you walk to the toilet,
Yeah.
need trimming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not very tall, but I'm
Nor am I, but I have to do
Yeah.
it.
There's always branches falling off it.
Pardon?
There's always branches falling off it.
No, they're not very big ones. I mean,
No.
Well, they are, they hit you on the head.
Okay,
I
so
just wondered if maybe Al
Something
could
could be
just
done
trim
there.
a bit off.
Alf could do a bit of trimming.
okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Reports for noting from outside bodies. We had the Calc meeting, the Ashford Calc meeting.
Are you still on it? Weren't you going to be standing aside?
I said that I might, I didn't. But it was a close run thing, as Lord Wellington said, Duke of Wellington said.
Excellent.
You mean there was a bite in the pavilion?
You mean
It was only a small-
there was
it was only
another
a small-
candidate?
What?
You mean there was another candidate?
Yeah. Well, there was last time. It was only a small turnout. A number of them were new, and I almost didn't get nominated until one of them realised that I hadn't been nominated. And it was 7-7. So I was re-elected on my own cast and vote.
Oh! That must have been the most exciting thing.
Calc is always exciting.
That's almost breathtaking.
The only thing that really
I call that corruption in my face.
It is, I agree with you.
The thing that really, I didn't vote
BBC
myself in the first
vote.
vote. I'm not sure if he did or not.
Surprised you weren't selling
The curious thing was that when I cast the vote in my favour, I thought he was delighted. He got put up by his boss. Anyhow, so that was all a bit weird. And the other one is the vice chairman. He just got re-elected as vice chairman again. So you ask a sensible question. I could have got rid of it, but I thought, I don't think that's the right.
That wasn't my advice, Jeremy.
No, the other problem is that the other guy is Ashford Independent. So whereas I'm non-party political, he's only just lost his place on Ashford. So he's very party political. The police report, we then got our police presentation, which is essentially about the new model of policing, for neighbourhood policing. We've all given this. I've told you about it before.
Yeah.
There's the way that they're going to do it with a beat team, a child-centred policing team, a neighbourhood task force, essentially a prevention hub and a rural task force that's very good that we've already got. The functions of each of them laid out, numbers of people which I haven't studied. A load of them have not yet arrived. In other words, they've got the structure now, but it's not fully populated. They have told us who the key people are, and we've got email addresses of the sergeants and the inspector. We have got PC Emmanuel Darley, who covers 9 Ashford wards, but they will split that in about half when they get all their people. They've got 6 beat team PCs at the minute, and they will get 12. So he's covering a lot. Exactly how the rest of it's going to work.
Out of interest, what's happened to our PCSO?
Our PCSO, Kate Richards, is now in the neighbourhood task force with a sergeant, a community liaison officer, and 3 PCSOs.
Where?
She is one. That'll be under Ashford.
Oh, okay.
And the neighbourhood task forces are kind of reinforcements to do particular issues that they get assigned. And then there's also, quite interestingly, a new child-centred policing team, but there's only a sergeant at the minute, no people.
Did they talk about how they plan to communicate that to the general public?
Not really. I don't know how they're going to do that. I think the main thing at the moment, and I keep banging on about it when I have the opportunity, is to say that people ought to join the my community voice, because quite a lot of interesting stuff comes out there on the latest frauds and things like that. But they've got very, very low take-up. I mean, we've got 500, 600 people on Nextdoor, I think, and they've got something like 3,000 people in the whole of Kent. You know, it's lamentable. But there you go. I mean, you can take the horse to water, can't you? The next thing was we got a presentation by ABC on their new waste contract. I put a note on Nextdoor, which you may have seen. They are not going out with their messaging yet. They say it's too early. I thought there's never any harm in just repeating things, but it also gave me the opportunity then to put on the trailer at the end about how people are putting nappies in the recycling bin or black bags, which get the waste. The whole load gets rejected, and we've got to try and stop that. It's very frustrating. We were given out, I've seen these before, just one copy of the waste and recycling guide, which I think everyone will probably get when the new contract starts, and the little doobry that tells you what you can do with your recycling.
Do you know why they lost the contract? Because we find
There was only one in it at the end. They didn't do it by tendering, they did it by negotiating with all the contractors who wanted to talk to them, and it went on for hours, months and months. I think it started with 4, came down to 2, and then at the end there was only one that still wanted to do it, which was Suez. They say they're quite pleased with them. It will be things that they decided to put in, like they wanted to run them at Ashford are buying the vehicles. Sorry, Suez are buying them, but Ashford are paying for them and will own them. They've had to order them over a year in advance. I think they're electric, but I'm not sure. They're partly electric, maybe. Maybe electric bin lifts, I don't know. But they didn't mention that this time. They're quite keen on, I mean, Suez are the people we had before Biffa. They were CETA then, but CETA and Suez is the same. I used to know them when I was in the business. Used to get on well with them actually. They're big French. They're Compagnie Lyonnais, which is the second biggest French water company. And they own Suez. Well, Suez came as well from, I think, Gaz France. I think that all went in as well. It's all French. It's a mixture of private and national. Okay, let me move on. We then had this is quite useful, we had a presentation by ABC on digital exclusion and related issues. Now, I've had a similar one earlier from a Kent guy at Christmas. And they know each other, they work together. The Kent guy who came to the county meeting, I asked him at the time, and I said it to you, I think, because they've got money, he said at the time, and they want to improve digital exclusion. And I said, could we get help from them to do something like an internet cafe in the village hall? Or tuition. We didn't have the broadband at the time, but we've got it now. And he said, oh yeah, that'd be good. Well, this time I asked again, and they said yes. They wouldn't have any money, but they'd be very keen to see it happen. They've done it in Ashford, they've done it in Tenterden. And the key to it is that it would have to be delivered by their Kents, actually, not Ashford's, but Kents, ones who live in Ashford. Digital champions who have been trained, qualified, and what's the test they do? DRS or something?
Driver's license.
No, the other one.
DBS.
DBS checked as well. And but they'd be quite happy to see this happen. So I asked Paul Hutchison on Friday night, because he's chairman here, and he said, I've just been approved as a digital champion today, and I've been DBS checked. So he's keen. The issue will be to get whatever help we want from Ashford, if any. I mean, they'll probably have online tuition or documentation, I don't know, whatever. If we need to buy any machines, maybe try and get some money out of Kent. But Paul's view is that mostly he would expect it to be one-to-one tuition, helping someone to set up and get to grips with a phone or tablet that they have just bought. But if we needed any for them to have a look at, to persuade them that it would be nice to buy one, maybe we need 1 or 2 that we can, but I think that's the sort of direction of travel. I think it would be quite useful, it would be something we were really doing. We've got a lot of old people in this village. A lot of them were just as computer literate as I am, but not all of them. Digital Derek's coming on. That's Derek Hartman. So, that sounded as though it was good. And of course, Paul's very keen. He reckoned that he had heard that Ashford did one in the gateway at Ashford, and they only got 4 people. And, we're in that game. We can arguably do he feels one for sure, maybe two, maybe three, we could definitely put ourselves on the map and be doing something for our residents. I think that it's entirely possible, if we don't get anywhere with Kent, because they are stripping their budgets out, that we might then want to think about putting some money in. But we're talking about a number of hundreds rather than many thousands.
That's good.
Okay. So I've done all that. I talked to Paul. And yes, the last thing, I think I mentioned to you, Yvonne, but I'm not sure. We did hear about a new defibrillator registration scheme. Did I talk to you about that? No. Okay, I didn't. Right, something that's popped up recently.
Yes.
I'll have to look for it.
Yes.
We've had this question before about the defibrillator outside and whether it's actually registered or not. It used to be for the health service to know that there's a defibrillator here if someone ran 999. And it seems as though nationally the whole registration system or whatever it was fell apart and there is a new one. And we were being told that we really need to register on the new one because that's the one NHS have got their minds around. We need to find out whether we were already on it or on a different one or blah, 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 blah.
Can I add to that? It was mentioned to be a couple of days ago by our first responder, Jo Posnett, and she said, who do I speak to on the parish council? Because...
You're ahead of me. Who's this Jo Posnett?
She's our first responder in the village. Do you remember John used to do that?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Jo took over. Lives just opposite diagonally to Alan. Okay, she's a very senior health midwife.
She's also a sort of subsidiary police person, isn't she?
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's an expert witness.
Oh,
as well.
She does.
You need a special constable.
Special constable.
Could be, yeah. But she asked me a couple of days ago, said, who's responsible in the parish? Who should I talk to on the parish council? Forgive me, but I said the person you really should, it's a bit like a digital letter, email it on, because then it gets on the system. Because she was making the point that she didn't think that our defibrillator was on the register. So if someone calls 999, it doesn't come up.
Exactly the same point.
And she asked me whether that was connected with the incident at the garage, and I said I didn't know. When the person couldn't find the defibrillator, because if you phone, you'll get given the code, and if it's not on the system, you won't be given the code, so you can't access it.
But we don't have our locked one. Some people have a locked one. Ours is not locked.
That was beyond me at that stage. But I think the most important thing is that our system, every defibrillator, frankly, needs to be.
Well, I did.
This is the same question, really.
Yeah.
It came through a few months ago that somebody who said you'd spoken to and you weren't on the register, so I thought, right, and I got the details and I went on, and it's not possible to put the village hall on because we haven't got the postcode or whatever, it's not recognised. It needed to be a house, it would pick up, a house it would pick up, but it wouldn't pick up, so I couldn't do it.
It has got a postcode.
Yes, postcode, but what you put in the postcode and it brings up,
Oh,
you know, like you do when you find
address.
your address, and there's everything by the village hall.
Okay, well the answer to that is what we actually have to do then, and I don't know how easy.
But I don't know whether it's this system.
No, but, well, whichever. But what we obviously have to do, if it doesn't come up on the postcode, is take that to the post office and get them to include it on their update, because they'll always be updating every month or so their postcode list because of new houses. If they haven't included the village hall, that has to be done.
The other thing that's being increasingly used, I use it a lot, is the what three words. And in fact, KCC Highways know exactly, you can report stuff, just one, what three words.
Yeah,
don't do what I do, what I did. I decided to be so exact, I went to the middle of the road where the pothole was, just for the exact thing. And as a car, I didn't realise I was about to get run over. And I figured that the what three word bit, 3 metres to the right, was probably close enough, and it was. And in fact, they were out within 3 days. It's amazing.
So what's
There's an app, what 3 words? Everywhere in the world is divided into 1 metre squares. So your front door will have unique what 3 words.
Yeah, you can have the app. I've got it
Yeah,
on here.
I've got it on here.
Okay. Thank you.
So it tells you exactly where it is. Yeah, I'll show you.
Right, that's all my stuff on calc. Any questions on that? No? Good. Any other items of information? Alan? No? Sally?
Somebody comes up with
Sue? Colin?
No, thank you.
Leslie?
Sorry, I missed it.
Too much talking.
Pay attention. Just to let you know, we're writing, Leslie and I are in Dissolves Lively Spices.
Right.
That's this part. I don't know what you are. You'll have to work it out.
Okay.
No,
Any items for information? No.
Yes,
Anyone's
please.
got
Alan,
something?
He's on the floor.
He goes to sign his form.
Please could I ask, because we're now the next, well, you missed that, the next one, next meeting is the 12th of September. Please could you let me know if you are going away, so that if I need anything from you, I know whether I'm going to get a response or not.
I will send you an email.
Yes, with your dates, please, but just so that I know, because
Yes.
I don't want to...
No,
No,
you
it's
don't want
not
to, you don't want to be a, find a black hole.
And actually, we seem to, John, I have got something.
Yeah, go on.
Just had a planning application that has just come in for 23 Lloyd's Green, which is for an extension, a side, single-storey side extension and front porch coming out. Now, from what I can see on the plans, they want a downstairs loo and shower room, so that's to go out. But obviously, they need to know by August. We're not having a meeting until September. So what I propose doing is asking you for your views and contacting number 22, because they will be the one most affected, because it's going to come forward of the property, and to see what they say. But it's obviously one that, because of the size, would have been permitted development rights, but because it's at the front, you have to have planning permission.
Sure.
So that's what I propose at the moment.
There's no reason why you can't use the delegation.
Yes.
Take people's advice and then make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Can I close the form?
Yes, you need to go there.